Chapter 408. The smile on Dean's face disappeared as he looked at the angry man. He threw the cup of hot coffee in his hand and kicked the table in front of him. The scalding hot water splashed on Ron's face. However, the pain was nothing compared to the anger in his heart. He kicked the table and broke it. He roared as he approached Dean and stabbed him with the dagger. Whoosh! At this time, a breeze came from behind. It was Gwyneth. She was holding a sword and was chasing after Dean. Ron didn't care as he went straight towards Dean. He would rather give up his life to take away Dean's life. Dean quietly looked at Ron's angry face. He suddenly smiled as he raised his hand and grabbed Ron's wrist. Ron's anger was abruptly stopped. Ron Cohen's pupils dilated as he looked at the youth in disbelief. The tremendous force that came from his wrist made him so shocked that he could not speak. "I'm sorry, but you can't kill me," Dean said with a smile. At the same time, he pulled Ron's hand that was holding the dagger to his chest. The dagger cut the left side of his chest. Puff! Ron's clothes were cut, and the tip of the dagger made a cut on his skin. Ron stared blankly. Before he could react, a sharp whistling sound came from behind him. The next moment, he only felt that his body was suddenly pulled by Dean, and he was not under his own control. The power that came from the boy was so great that it made him feel terrified. Then he saw his body turn around, facing the back. The girl who had previously searched his body was holding a sword, and her pretty face was as cold as frost. She did not have the temperament that a servant should have. Puff! The sword pierced through his heart. Blood gushed out of Ron Cohen's throat. He wanted to swallow it, but the blood rushed up his throat too quickly. In the end, he didn't have the strength to swallow it. He suddenly spat it out, and blood splattered all over the ground, staining the girl in front of him. His consciousness blurred. Runcorn fell to the ground, dead. Dean smiled and retracted his hand. He called Crone, "Bring me my first aid kit. Also inform the magistrate that there is an assassination attempt." Crone and Nicotine, who were already frightened, immediately agreed and ran away. "Thanks for your hard work," Dean said to Gwyneth as he sat down on the sofa that was pushed into the hall. He bandaged himself and said to Gwyneth. Gwyneth was still holding the sword as she stood in front of the corpse. She didn't care about the blood splashing on her face and body. She silently looked at the teenager. "This is what I should do." Gwyneth's fingers gently rubbed the hilt of the sword as she spoke. She guessed that if Sergei was here, then he would be shocked. Although she and Sergei expected Dean to remove the steel nails because he wasn't afraid of their sneak attack, but they had seen with their own eyes that the teenager's strength was much higher than theirs. Ron Cohen's physique wasn't inferior to his senior hunters. In fact, he was even stronger than most senior hunters. However, he was like a weak child in front of Yeshiwan. He was easily subdued. Gwyneth couldn't help but think of the legendary monster's body outside the giant wall. Her mood was a bit complicated. A hunter with legendary magic marks was sitting in front of her. She lived in the inner wall, so she knew how great the potential of a person with legendary magic marks was. Moreover, the other party was a master of the invention. He had enough resources to cultivate himself and set foot on the highest peak. After a moment, the magistrate arrived. 2 teams of knights of the magistrate and 2 deacons of the magistrate came in a hurry in the dark. It showed how much importance they attached to Dean's matter. As soon as they entered the hall, the 2 deacons saw Dean sitting on the sofa next to the hall. Dean's chest was bandaged with gauze. The girl was silently standing next to him with a sword in her hand. There was also a corpse on the ground and 2 stewards who were silent next to him. There was dead silence in the hall. The 2 deacons of the magistrate were surprised. Their eyes stayed on the corpse for a moment. They came to the front of Dean. "Master, is this the murderer who tried to assassinate you?" Dean nodded. "Please help me find out the identity of this person. Why did he want to assassinate me?" "Leave it to us." Rose took a deep breath. "Master, are you okay? Do you want me to call someone to check your body?" Dean shook his head. "It's just a scratch. I'm fine." Rose saw that the gauze was wrapped with a faint red color. There was a very long diagonal scar. Rose was scared. "Master, I'll send someone to check. Please describe the assassination." Duddian nodded. "The man said that he had something to ask of me, so I asked the attendant to let him in. But he didn't say a few words and suddenly attacked me. Fortunately, I had her to protect me. Plus, I'm a knight, so I was able to avoid a fatal blow. Rose nodded and asked the assistant to write down the details. Rose looked at Dean. Master, we have to investigate the scene. Please, I'll go upstairs to rest. Dean said. Okay. Rose's nodded. Take care. Dean raised his hand and slowly went upstairs with Nicotine's help. The next day, New World News once again published a shocking news. Master of Invention and City Defense hero Dean was assassinated last night. He almost lost his life. The shocking title attracted countless people to buy the newspaper. New World News once again won the first place in newspaper sales. Mel family. George woke up from his bed. The maid helped him to change into soft home clothes. He washed his face and brushed his teeth. He went to the dining room with the help of the maid. The newspaper and breakfast were ready on the table. He sat down and took a sip of the warm milk to moisten his throat. Then he put on his reading glasses, picked up the newspaper, shook it, and quietly read it. Soon, he finished reading the newspaper and moved on to the next one. After reading 2 copies in a row, he got the 3rd copy. Master of Divinity, the hero of the city, Dean was assassinated last night and almost lost his life. George's eyes swept over the title. His fingers that were holding the newspaper slightly trembled. His face turned red as he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood splashed into the glass of milk and his breakfast plate. Master. Chapter 409. Knock. There was a hurried knock on the door. Mark was drowsy from exhaustion when he heard this sound. His brain was in pain. He didn't have the strength to open his eyelids. He instinctively frowned. Last night, he drank a lot of wine in order to win over several big families. Although he drank some sobriety medicine afterwards, he was still a bit uncomfortable. At the moment he heard this sound, his heart was unspeakably irritated. He raised his hand to pinch the bridge of his nose and sighed softly. He knew that something must have happened for someone to knock on the door so urgently. Sitting up from the bed, he raised his hand slightly. The maid next to him handed him a warm and wet towel. He wiped his face and let out a sigh of relief. Is it Saya? Come in. The maid opened the door and Sarah rushed in. She was startled as she saw her tired father sitting on the bed. There was a trace of guilt in her heart, but she quickly said, Father, something big has happened. Speak slowly. Mark's face sank as he stood up. The maid immediately came forward to help him put on his clothes. Sarah Mel quickly handed the newspaper in her hand and said, Father, look. Mark took the newspaper and swept it. He saw the eye-catching title. His tired face froze as if he was struck by lightning. Sarah didn't expect her calm father to react like this. She was scared and nervous as she said, Father, did you send someone to do this? If not, with that kid's sinister personality, do you think he'll smear this matter on us? Mark gradually recovered. Commander Ron, tell him to come and see me. Commander Runcorn? Sarah was at a loss. She suddenly thought of something and her face changed. Father, it shouldn't be. Mark rudely interrupted her. I'm asking you if he's here. I'll go and ask the butler. Sarah was shocked. Her father had never been so fierce to her since she was a child. Even when she made a mistake and messed up the family's business worth 100,000 gold coins, he didn't say half a word to her. He even comforted her. But she also realized the seriousness of the matter. She immediately turned around and ran out. After a moment, Sarah returned with a pale face. Father, Commander Ron isn't here. Mark had just changed his clothes. His body shook as he heard this. He almost fainted. Father, could it be that this was really done by Commander Ron Cohen? Sarah Mel's lips slightly trembled. Why? Did you send him? If it's really him, then the newspaper said that the assassin failed and was killed by his squire. Sooner or later, the investigation will lead to us. Mark stood in the same place. His mind was buzzing. He couldn't hear what his daughter was saying. Boundless despair shrouded his heart. He had fallen many times in his life, but he had never suffered such a huge setback. Did Ron betray me? No, he won't betray me. If he was bought, then I would lose my life. What's the use of money? Mark gradually recovered from his chaotic thoughts. His mind became clearer and clearer. He He finally understood what was going on. The thief was crying thief. It was such a simple method, but he fell into it. His fists were clenched so tightly that they trembled slightly due to excessive force. His nails dug deep into his palms without him even realizing it. Although he had considered this point when he allowed Ron to go, but he didn't think about it carefully. After all, with Ron's strength, there weren't many people in the outer wall who could stop him. There were even fewer people who wanted to assassinate him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to be the commander of the Knights and protect the Mel family for so many years. Moreover, he knew the strength of Dean's attendants. Only 2 of them were a threat to Ron. Both of them were bailed out from Thornflower Prison by Dean. Ron should be able to protect himself and retreat even if he couldn't beat them. But he didn't expect that he would die in Dean's castle. The only explanation was that the other side had set up an ambush from the beginning and was waiting for him to come to them. The so-called bribe was just a cover. He also tried to take this opportunity to get rid of Dean. Even if he couldn't get rid of Dean, he could take this opportunity to get important information from Dean's mouth and then counterattack. Who would have thought that it would be a dead move? He was directly checkmated by Dean. "Father, Father," Sarah cried out as she saw Mark in a trance. Mark took a deep breath. "Don't tell your grandfather about this. He can't bear this blow. Call Mel and Myers and tell everyone to come over. Prepare for a family meeting and transfer the funds. Be sure to be quick." Sarah was shocked. "Father, what did you say? Transfer the funds? Are you going to?" "Yes, the Mel family is finished." Mark's eyes were full of killing intent. "But we won't perish. One day we will rise again. Now we have to minimize the losses." Sarah Mel felt as if she had been struck by lightning. In her mind, everyone in the commercial district knew about the Mel family. They were like the aristocracy of the aristocracy. They were high up in the sky, but now they were finished. The Mel family that had stood at the top for decades was going to be overshadowed in one night. "Father." Sarah looked at Mark. "It's just an assassination. Let's give the magistrates some money. We can give them 10 times more money so that they will turn a blind eye to it. If we withdraw our money, then it will be very difficult for us to make a comeback in the future. I don't believe that he is just a master. Even if we find out that the murderer is Commander Ron Cohen, what can we do about it? We just have to say that Commander Ron did it himself. What does it have to do with us?" Mark frowned. "Nonsense. A loss is a loss. We have underestimated the enemy. We have let him exploit the loopholes again and again. There is no way to recover with money. Assassinating a master will alarm the Holy Church. According to the agreement between a magistrate and the Holy Church, they have the right to send people to participate in the magistrate's investigation. The Light Church is very protective of their own people. They will definitely listen to that brat's instructions and put the blame on us. There's no hope anymore. Our only hope now is to rise again." But Sarah's heart was in pain. She couldn't accept such a blow. She wanted to act like an ordinary noble lady of the same age. However, there were some words that she couldn't say. She just couldn't accept such a cruel reality. She couldn't bear it. "Go!" Mark angrily rebuked. Sarah bit her lips. Tears flowed out from her sparkling crystal-like eyes and fell down her beautiful cheeks. She wiped her tears, covered her mouth, and turned around to run out. "Second floor, study room. The words are wrong. Copy them 100 times." Dean threw the small book in front of the boy. The boy was Gabriel. "Not only can you read, but also write. Knowledge is more useful than a sword. Do you know?" Gabriel bowed his head. "Understand, young master." Dean nodded. "Go." Gabriel took his little book and turned to leave. Behind him, a small house made of countless small blocks was placed on the table. The little girl, Artemis, lay on the table, carefully piling up the roof with her hands. Her green hair set off her little face, making her look as cute as a porcelain doll. Dean got up and sat down at the desk. "What is this?" Artemis was a little timid before him. She shrank back and said, "It's a house." "Do you like such a house?" "I like it." Dean smiled. He stretched out his finger and flicked it at the bottom of the house. A block flew out and pushed the blocks next to it to move. The tall house collapsed in an instant and became a table of scattered blocks. Artemis was stunned. She looked at the scattered blocks on the table and then looked at Dean. Her lips flattened and her eyes turned red. It seemed that she wanted to cry, but she didn't dare to do so. Last time she cried, and her brother was punished to swing his sword 3,000 times. His hands were so sore that he couldn't even hold the knife. It seems that the house you built isn't strong enough, Dean said. Artemis flattened her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Let's do it again. Dean smiled. Don't be angry. There will be punishment if the house isn't a mess. Chapter 410. Master Dean. The identity of the assassin has been investigated. In the hall, Deacon Ross reported to the teenager who was sitting on the sofa. His attitude was polite, and there was even a trace of humility in it. In terms of status, Deacon of Magistrate was barely equal to Senior Architect. He had to be polite in front of a master, not to mention a master like Dean who was destined to have an extraordinary future and unlimited potential. Dean nodded. He saw Rose's aura. Deacon, please speak. I'll listen. Rossace was flattered. He nodded and said, All right, master. This assassin is called Ron Cohen. He was born in a commoner's family. At the age of 13, he caught the eye of Knight Veniamin of the Hall of Knights and was accepted as a student. Later, under Knight Veniamin's guidance, he gradually rose to prominence. At the age of 28, he successfully passed the Golden Knight test and became an outstanding Golden Knight. Shortly after becoming a Golden Knight, Ron Cohen declined all invitations and took the initiative to join the Mel family. Since then, he has served as the commander of the Mel family. Ross looked at Dean. He had heard about the conflict between Dean and Mel family. It was easy for him to find out the truth as long as he wanted to investigate. Dean's calm expression sank. Deacon, do you mean that the Mel family sent someone to assassinate me? Rose smiled. Master, this is only a preliminary investigation. We haven't found out whether Mel family is behind this or he came here on his own. Rose's voice couldn't help but weaken as he said this. Why would a knight commander take the risk to assassinate a master if there was no instruction? Haven't found out? Dean turned to look at him. Deacon, how long do you think it will take to find out? Ross could feel the anger in Dean's words. He couldn't afford to offend either of them. He reluctantly smiled. Master, don't worry. We will take the time to investigate and let the Mel family give you a reply as soon as possible. If they're the mastermind, then we will give you an explanation. Moreover, our people have gone to the Mel family to investigate. Dean nodded. There was still a bit of anger on his face, but he didn't say anything. Investigate? At this moment, a clear voice came from outside the hall. Dean and Rose saw a middle-aged man in silver armor enter the room. The arrogance on his face converged as he saw Dean, Holy Church's keeper, Redmayne. Greetings, Master Dean. Please forgive me for taking the liberty to visit. What was supposed to come had finally come. There was a touch of smile on Dean's face. Hello, I didn't greet you. I hope you can forgive me. Master, you're too polite. Redmayne smiled. We have been ordered to cooperate with a magistrate to investigate the assassination case. We will give Master a satisfactory answer. Most of the people who dare to attack Master are related to the dark cult. I will personally send someone to Mel family to investigate. Master, please be patient. Dean nodded. Thank for the trouble. Rose's face slightly changed. He sighed in his heart. He knew that the Mel family was finished. Assassinating a master of the Temple of Elements established by the Holy Church would only result in them being labeled as a cult. This wasn't something that the Mel family could bear, especially in the current situation where they had a bad reputation and no one could help them. They couldn't bear it. Deacon Rose, it's a pleasure to cooperate with you. Redmayne smiled and reached out his hand. Rosaith reached out and took it. He nodded and said nothing. What did you say? Sarah looked at her brother in shock. There was a trace of fear in her eyes as she said, You want to investigate us as a cult? Melk sighed. His handsome face that had once charmed countless rich girls was now full of sadness. Based on my understanding as a Knight of Light, once a senior member of the Holy Church is assassinated, they will definitely conduct a strict investigation and send out the lawkeeper. This has already been agreed with the magistrate. The magistrate has no right to organize the investigation. Once the lawkeeper defines the assassination as a cult activity, they will have a right to investigate and judge. Once the Radiant Church is in control, given their style of doing things, they will most likely conduct a strict investigation. They might even use some special methods. Unless we are really innocent and have never had any contact with the Dark Church. Once we do, they will definitely find out. There is no way to escape this. Everyone's face turned ugly as they heard Melk's words. The Mel family was a powerful family in the commercial district. They had many industries under their command. They had to deal with people from all walks of life. Naturally, they couldn't avoid the Dark Church. Even the notorious alchemists of the Dark Church didn't mean anything to them. This was the unspoken rule and tacit agreement between the nobles. No noble could say that they were innocent. If the investigation was strict, it would be inevitable to find out many things that had been covered up. Sarah bit her lips and clenched her slender fingers. We must not let the Keeper get involved in the investigation. If they investigate one by one, then they will definitely find out that our family has been in contact with the Dark Church. We might even have some business cooperation. If it is proven, then the crime will be too heavy. Not only will we be deprived of all our assets, but we may not even be able to keep our noble status. Everyone looked at each other. How could they not be aware of this? However, what could they do to stop the Keeper of the Order? At this time, the crowd suddenly parted. Mark slowly walked toward them. He stood on the steps and looked around at everyone. His cheeks were a bit depressed, but he still maintained an indifferent and dignified appearance. Someone must take responsibility for this matter. I will take responsibility when the Keeper of the Holy Church comes to investigate. This assassination is purely a business competition. In this case, there will only be some fines. Now you should sell your properties as soon as possible. You should transfer your assets and funds out of the family. Everyone was stunned. Sarah looked at her father. Tears fell from her eyes. There was a tearing pain in her heart. She suddenly regretted her willfulness and self-righteousness. If she could have killed that boy earlier, then there wouldn't have been any problems. But now, the entire family had been forced into such a sorry state by a single person. Regret. Pain. Regret. She had never regretted something like this. Unfortunately, time wouldn't reverse for her. Suddenly, a cough came from behind Mark. Mark was startled. He turned his head and saw his father being supported by the butler. They hadn't seen each other for half a day. Everyone looked at the old man with shocked expressions on their faces. George used to be strong and energetic, but now he looked like an old man. His back was stooped. The wrinkles on his face were unprecedentedly deep and old. He was wearing a fur coat, which made him look even thinner. Father. Mark hurriedly came forward. George looked at him and sighed. He reached out and patted the back of Dudian's hand. Child, do you remember what I told you before? If you're knocked down by the enemy's fist, then use your sword to stab back. The future of the family is in your hands. Mark's complexion changed. Father, this is my negligence. It's my fault. I will bear the responsibility I mold. George quietly looked at him. His eyes swept across the audience and saw the faces of the younger generation. He smiled and said, when people get old, it's time to die. Moreover, this small matter won't kill me. You are all my good children. You have to work harder in the future, understand? Chapter 411. Is the fireplace on fire? Dean tightened the blanket and put his hands into the sweater. He asked Crone, who was next to him. Crone saw that Dudian was shivering in the cold. He replied, Master, the fireplace is burning. Would you like to sit by the fireplace? Dean frowned but silently nodded. He got up and went to the fireplace next to the sofa. Crone took the animal fur blanket and patted it on the sofa. Dean sat down after the blanket was laid out. The fire in the fireplace crackled, and the warm light shone on his face, but he still felt that his whole body was bone-chilling cold, and he couldn't help but feel a little worried. Black snowflakes were falling from the sky outside the window. The snowflakes were mixed with radiation particles. The speed of the snowflakes was relatively fast as they hit the ground and the window. The door was pushed open. Artemis timidly came in. She looked at Crone. Master, did you call me? Although she was only 4 or 5 years old, the hardships of childhood made her more sensible than other children of the same age. Coupled with Dean's teaching these days, She also learned to call Dean like other people in the castle. Dean nodded and beckoned her to come over. Artemis was nervous as she slowly came in front of Dean. Dean reached out and touched her green hair. He had never seen such a hair color in the outer wall. Civilians had brown or black hair, while nobles had blonde or pale gold hair. Such a unique hair color was extremely rare. He whispered, "Have you finished today's homework?" "I'm done," Artemis answered honestly, her voice crisp and tender. Dean nodded and sat her on his lap. "What story do you want to listen to today?" Artemis blinked her bright eyes and felt a little relieved. She knew that this big brother was the most gentle when he was telling a story. He would never get angry, but he seemed to be a different person when he was telling a story. She tilted her head and thought for a while. "I still want to hear the story of the ugly duckling from last time." Dean smiled. "I have finished the story of the ugly duckling. Today I will tell you the story of Snow White. Do you want to hear it?" Snow White? Artemis blinked. Wasn't the snow black? How could there be white snow? Crone was quietly waiting next to Dadian, but his ears were pricked up. He liked the stories told by Dadian and admired him. Dadian was a friend of the same age, but he knew more than him. "The snow is white." Dean smiled. "In a distant place where the snow is white." The story began in that place. There was a... Dudian's soft voice echoed in the room as the black snow fell on the window. The firewood in the fireplace cracked. Time passed unknowingly. Artemis sat in Dean's arms and listened obediently. She didn't interrupt Dean's words like other little girls who would interrupt Dean's words to ask questions. When the story was finished, Crone was still immersed in it and had not come back to his senses. Artemis's eyes lit up. "The 7 dwarves are so pitiful." Dean smiled but didn't speak. He gently put her back on the ground. "Go and practice your swordsmanship." Artemis came to her senses. Knowing that this was the end of her gentleness, she nodded and said, "I'm going, young master." With that, she left the study. Crone quietly watched her leave. "Master, your time is so precious. Why are you wasting time by telling her these stories?" Blindly exercising and learning. There is no warmth. Only monsters will be cultivated. Dean's expression was flat. People who have fairy tales in their heart will have persistence. When the fairy tales are shattered, it is time to break the cocoon and become a butterfly. Crone was startled. He was at a loss. Dean sighed as he looked at the black snow that had accumulated on the window lattice. There was a trace of darkness in his eyes. Knock. A sound came from outside the door. "Come in." Nicholas pushed the door and respectfully said, "Master, the Knight's Hall has sent someone to summon you." Dean's eyes flashed slightly. He nodded, lifted the warm blanket on his body, put down the book, and got up to leave the fireplace. After leaving the room, the air seemed to be colder. His pores shrank slightly, and he shivered slightly, but he didn't want to let others see that he was shivering. He could only purse his lips, tense his body, and unconsciously look indifferent. He went downstairs. Dean saw a knight in the hall. He was about 30 years old. He was wearing a golden knight's armor. He had an imposing appearance and thick eyebrows. The man said after seeing Dean, "I'm Alva. Greetings, Master Dean." Dean nodded. "I've been waiting for a long time. Please sit down." "No, I'm here to deliver a letter." "This is your letter." Alva respectfully handed over a piece of paper. Dean took a look and nodded. "No problem. I'll go with you." Alva was overjoyed. "All right." Dean ordered Crone to prepare the horses. He was about to go out when a team of people came from the distance. Redmayne was leading the team. He saluted Dean and nodded to Alva. "Master, Mel family's patriarch George has admitted that he sent people to assassinate you. He has been arrested and imprisoned in the military. He has been sentenced to life imprisonment." Dean's eyes lit up. "What is the reason for the assassination?" Redmayne hesitated. "According to the magistrate's investigation, it should be because of business competition. If you die, then New World Consortium won't be able to rely on you and suppress the Melon Consortium." So Dean nodded. "I know. Thank you for your hard work." "Of course it's snowing outside." "Grandmaster, where are you going?" Redmayne asked as he looked at Alva. He had a guess in his mind. Alva answered for Dean. "Master is going to receive a knight medal." Redmayne looked at Dean in admiration. Master is not only great in the field of divinity, but also has the strength of a knight. I really admire you." Dean said goodbye to Redmayne and rode away with Alva. They rode for more than an hour before arriving at the Knight's Hall. "Master, please." Alva led the way. Dean kept up with him. The Knight's Hall was as majestic as ever. It was like a huge square with a high dome. The walls were embedded with wall lamps and crystals. It was extremely luxurious and simple. It didn't have the vulgarity of gold and jade, but exuded nobility and sacredness. "This is the seal platform." Alva led Dean to a hall. There was a huge circular platform in the middle of the hall. Outside the circular platform was a circle of seats. Currently, there were 12 figures sitting around it. All of them were wearing knight armor and had knight medals on them. Behind these 12 figures, there were 3 figures sitting on a higher level of seats. They were 2 golden knights, and the one in the middle was an old man wearing bright golden armor. He had an extremely thick white beard. "Dean, please come to the platform," the white-bearded old man said. His majestic voice spread throughout the hall. Dean came to the center of the round platform along the narrow aisle. The white-bearded old man deeply looked at Dudian. "I swear." "We swear," the 12 knights around him shouted in unison. "Humble, courteous, upright," the white-bearded old man recited loudly. Every time he recited a sentence, the 12 knights around him would recite a sentence as well. The majestic code of chivalry reverberated in the hall, causing the walls to echo loudly. After a moment, the white-bearded old man finished reciting. He pulled out his sword, stood up from his seat, and walked down the stairs step by step. He came to Dean and said, "Are you willing to accept the knight's mission?" Dean knelt on one knee, bowed his head, and said, "I'm willing to accept." The white-bearded old man pressed the sword on his shoulder and said, "Swear." Dean took a deep breath. With a solemn expression, he sonorously swore, "I, Dean, swear that I will follow the knight's code of conduct all my life. Humility, integrity, compassion, heroism, justice, sacrifice, glory, soul. The knight's code is my code. I swear I will treat the weak well. Enslave them. I swear I will bravely fight against the ruthlessness of the asterisk, 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 asterisk. I swear I will fight against all wrong. Reflection. I swear I will fight for the unarmed. Use. I swear I will help anyone who asks me for help. Valuable. I swear I will not hurt any woman, will not provoke me. I swear I will help my brother knight. Bribe. I swear I will be sincere to my friends. Surface. I swear I will love until death." The oath echoed in the hall. After a moment, the oath ended. The white-bearded old man took back his sword and stretched out his hand. Dean took his hand and stood up. It wasn't a sign of help, but a symbol of inheritance. At this time, 2 golden knights came over with a new set of golden knight's armor and a golden knight's sword. They handed over to Dean. The white-bearded old man took out a knight's medal from his hand. It wasn't a golden knight's medal, but a bright gold one. The edge of the medal was inlaid with crystal diamonds. It was the highest level crystal knight medal of the Knight's Hall. Crystal Knight was the highest glory of a knight. It symbolized flawlessness and purity. From today onwards, you are a golden knight of the Knight Hall. The white-bearded old man seriously looked at Dean. "But in view of your excellent performance, we will make an exception to give you a Crystal Knight medal. You will have most of the privileges and treatment of a Crystal Knight. We will replace your armor once you become a Crystal Knight. Do you understand?" Dean nodded. "I understand." The white-bearded old man nodded and handed over the medal to Dean. Chapter 412. Dean left the Knight's Hall and rode back to the castle after he heard about the origin of the knight profession and the rights he had at his disposal. He didn't know who leaked the news, but a large number of newspaper staff had gathered outside the castle. The scene was very crowded, and there were some disturbances. Dean felt that his body was freezing. His face was pale, but he didn't slow down as he rode straight back to the castle. Noyce, who was guarding the entrance to the castle, saw Dean from afar. He saw that Dean didn't slow down, so he opened the door to let him enter. The newspaper staff didn't dare to stop Dean as they saw him galloping. They just waited for Dean to enter. Noyce quickly closed the door and ordered everyone to retreat. The horse galloped through the manor and gradually stopped in front of the castle gate. Dean dismounted from a horse. He could not help but shiver slightly. He took a deep breath and rubbed his hands. Crone took out the blanket that was previously draped over Dean and wrapped it around him. When Dean stepped into the castle, he staggered and almost fell. His face was pale, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. The blood was pitch black and exuded a strong stench. His vision was blurred, and he hurriedly ordered before he fell, "Don't look for a doctor." He fainted before he finished his words. Crone hurried to support him, but he only had one arm, so he couldn't hold him. Gwyneth, who was dressed as a maid, rushed over and hugged Dean. She saw that Dean didn't respond, so she touched his eyelids. She frowned as she carried Dean and walked upstairs. At the same time, she looked at Crone. "Don't leak the news. Tell the people outside to get out of here." Crone reacted and quickly turned to go out. "I'll go," Nicholas said, his hunched back straightening, giving off a dignified air. Crone saw this and quickly turned to go upstairs. Gwyneth kicked open Dean's study room and carried him to the sofa by the fireplace. She looked at Crone. "Add some firewood to the fireplace. He might be cold." Crone reacted and ran away in a hurry. But he remembered that he only had one arm, and there were only a few of them in the castle. The servants were dismissed by Dean. The only idle person was Sergei. It was cold. Gwyneth touched Dean's left arm. She felt as if she was touching an ice cube. She was surprised. Previously, when she carried Dean upstairs, she felt that his body temperature was not normal. It was so cold that it was prickling her hand. She reached out and touched Dean's forehead. It was warm. Then she touched his neck artery. It was slow and cold. She reached out and touched Dean's chest. It felt like touching ice. "It's so cold." Gwyneth was surprised. His body temperature was so low, but he was still alive. It was incredible. She thought of the legendary magic mark that Dean had obtained, and her heart was moved. But on second thought, the legendary magic mark had already taken root in Dean's body. Even if it was taken out, it could not be used again. The touch of excitement in her heart suddenly calmed down. She frowned and pondered. Among the possibilities that she could think of, Dean's low body temperature could only be caused by the legendary magic mark. Was this the side effect of the legendary magic marks? Or was it something else? While she was lost in thought, Sergei and Crone brought firewood and lit it in the fireplace. Sergei gave the job of lighting the fire to Crone. He looked at Dean and then looked at Gwyneth. Did he really faint? Nothing big happened, right? Did you get attacked on the way back? Gwyneth replied, "He didn't have any injuries. Maybe he was poisoned. He ate or drank something." Gwyneth slightly shook her head. "Do you think he'll eat other people's food? Especially after the hot soup incident. Even if the Knight's Hall gave him something, he might not eat it, right?" Sergei felt that it was reasonable. If that's not the case, then is it a relapse of an old disease? He turned to Crone. "Do you know what old disease he has? Maybe we should write a letter and ask old Feline." Crone lit the firewood. He thought for a moment. He didn't know that Dean had left the orphanage. Perhaps only Patriarch Feline knew about Dean. He immediately said, "Okay, I'll write a letter to inform him." Gwyneth suddenly said, "Wait. Sergei, huh?" Gwyneth turned to look at him. If it is a relapse of an old disease, then Patriarch Feline should know about it. Otherwise, he would have asked us to inform him before he fainted. If we rashly inform Patriarch Feline, then the enemy might have planted an informant under his eyes. Wouldn't the news be exposed? He told us not to find a doctor because he doesn't want the news to spread out. Sergei shrugged. What's there to be afraid of? Who would dare to attack us? I'll kill them. Gwyneth coldly looked at him. Are you sure that you are the #1 master in the outer wall? Sergei was startled. His face changed as he closed his mouth. Let's wait for him to wake up. Gwyneth said, during this time we can't leak any information. Tell the newspaper staff to shut up. Don't they want to interview the young master about his knighthood? Pass the news to the New World News. Crone hesitated. If we don't say anything, then it will inevitably cause speculation and continue to peep. Gwyneth said, we can't hide this matter. If he wakes up and wants to blame me, then let him blame me. Crone thought for a moment. All right, Sergei looked at Dean after Crone left. He pinched Dean's face. Wow, so cold. Sergei retracted his hand and looked at Gwyneth. Is he dead? How come his body is colder than a dead person? Colder than a dead person means that he isn't dead, Gwyneth coldly said. Sergei looked at her strangely. Do you think that he is pretending to be dead to test us? Gwyneth indifferently said, I don't rule out such a possibility. You could try. Sergei shrugged his shoulders. I won't try. It won't do us any good even if he dies. Anyway, I don't see anyone in the outer wall who is more valuable than him. Well, Gwyneth coldly snorted in disdain. Sergei laughed. Isn't it? If you want to go to the inner wall, then you can only rely on him. If you go to other consortiums, then you will be treated as a chess piece. After all, we have fought together. Even if we don't have love, we should at least have friendship. Don't be so cold to me. I can only be ruthless to you, Gwyneth indifferently replied. Sergei shrugged his shoulders as he didn't care. The temperature in the room rose as the flames in the fireplace got warmer and warmer. A few hours passed in the blink of an eye. Dean slowly opened his eyes. He felt as if his body was immersed in a bath that was half cold and half warm. He felt uncomfortable. His stomach was churning and he wanted to vomit. His head was dizzy and painful. He couldn't think as he reluctantly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Artemis's delicate face. Dean's heart was inexplicably warm. He didn't know why he had such a feeling. He looked up and saw Gwyneth and Gabriel sitting on the sofa. Master, you woke up? Artemis was surprised to see Dean wake up. Several people in the room were surprised and rushed over. Chapter 4:13. Nicholas, who was next to Gwyneth, carefully supported Dean's body. He took the soft pillow from Gwyneth and placed it on Dean's back. He helped Dean to lean on the sofa. Master, are you okay? Crone asked in a worried tone. Dean took a deep breath. The warm air entered his body and dispelled the cold. He reached out and touched Artemis's head. How long have I been asleep? About 6 hours. Nicholas replied. Dean was relieved. The news didn't leak out, right? No, there are only a few of us here. The staff of a newspaper have been driven away. Nicotine replied. As you ordered, we didn't call a doctor. Are you feeling better now? How about I call a doctor to take a look and, after the diagnosis, we'll kill him to silence him. Dean felt the cold air climb up from his abdomen. He took a deep breath and said, Do you remember the people I asked you to bring? There's a girl called Jura. You can call her over. Don't worry about the others. Jura? Nicholas was puzzled. Did you bring her from the civilian area? Yes. Nicholas nodded. I'll go right away. He turned and left the room. Sergei looked at Dean after Nicholas left. Are you okay? How could you suddenly get sick with your body? Did you get injured in the battlefield? Dean didn't answer. He had a faint guess in his heart, but he wasn't sure. Half an hour later, Nicholas returned with a middle-aged woman. She was dressed beautifully, but unlike most women who would put on weight when they reached middle age, her figure was still slender and straight, exuding an intellectual beauty. Jura was startled as she saw Dean lying on the sofa. Her eyes were slightly red. She hadn't seen Dean since a few years ago. She thought that she would gradually forget about the adopted child when Dean was in prison. She didn't expect that the child would come out of prison after a few years. Moreover, she learned from the newspaper that Dean was wrongly imprisoned. She wanted to come and find Dean when she heard the news. However, the boundary was like a chasm that she couldn't cross. After that, she continued to see news about Dean in the newspapers. Especially in recent times, his name had occupied almost all the pages of the newspapers. Everyone in the outer wall didn't know about him. Sometimes she even had an illusion that it was just a person with the same name. But from a newspaper report about Dean's life, she knew that he was the orphan that she had adopted. When the war broke out and she was taken to the commercial district, she was even more convinced of this point. She had been looking forward to the reunion after a long time. She wanted to have the opportunity to compensate the child. But after coming to the commercial district, she didn't see Dean as she wished. Until today, when they met again, the latter wasn't the high-spirited genius in her mind. Instead, he was weak and pale with a sad appearance. She suddenly felt a stab of pain in her heart. Although they had not been together for a long time after she adopted Dean, She had always regarded him as her own child. She thought that Dean was now living a luxurious life without worries. But after coming to the castle, she found that it was not as luxurious and gorgeous as she had imagined. She suddenly realized that this child had paid an unimaginable price to climb to today's position without anyone to rely on. All of you go out. There was a trace of complex color in Dean's eyes as he saw Jura. His voice was a bit hoarse. Crone will stay behind to take care of me. Gwyneth looked at him and turned to leave. There was a trace of strange expression on Sergei's face, but he didn't say anything. He led Gabriel and Artemis out of the room. The sound of the door closing seemed to awaken Jura. She quickly reacted and hurried forward. Were you feeling uncomfortable? Dean looked at her anxious face. There was a trace of pain in his heart. In just a few years, there were a few strands of white hair in her hair. Time was always ruthless. I feel cold, Dudian whispered. Jura quickly reached out to touch Dean's forehead. She suddenly retracted her hand. Her face was full of shock and even a trace of panic. How could it be so cold? Crone remembered that this woman was the aunt who adopted Dean. He asked as he saw her panic, Auntie, you're a doctor. Do you know what disease young master has? Jura didn't answer him as she reached out to touch Dean's neck. Then she retracted her hand to touch his arm, chest, and other parts of his body. Every time she touched his body, she would quickly retract her hand. It was as if she was being burned by fire. The surprise on her face gradually turned into panic. How can it be possible that his body temperature is so low? She was a little flustered. According to her medical knowledge and understanding of the human body, an ordinary person with such a low body temperature should have frozen to death. But Dean was still alive. It was a miracle. Dean's heart sank as he saw her panicked expression. He knew that Jura wasn't a top doctor, but her medical skills were good. He didn't expect such a reaction from her. Auntie, don't worry. Dean took a deep breath and said in a soft voice, If we can't find the reason, we can do surgery. I feel cold in my abdomen. The problem should be here. Abdomen. Jura quickly put her hand into the expensive blanket. Her fingertips retracted as she touched Dean's abdomen. How can it be so cold? She felt that even when she touched ice, it was not so cold. The coldness in Dean's abdomen was like a sharp knife piercing her hand. It was even colder than ice. However, if it was colder than ice, wouldn't Dean's body be frozen? How could a person survive if his abdomen was frozen? She bit her lips and said to Crone, Help me get some hot water. Crone was anxious. He felt that he could be useful as soon as he heard Jura's words. He quickly ran. Jura squatted beside the sofa and opened her medical box. Inside the box, there were all kinds of scalpels and needles. In addition, there were gauze, hemostatic powder, anesthetic powder, and so on. She lifted the blanket and peeled off the clothes on Dean's abdomen. She used the anesthetic powder. Soon the hot water was brought. Jura took a deep breath and said to Dean, You have to endure it. Dean whispered, You do it. I'll watch. Hearing this, Jura's eyes turned red. When she operated on other nobles or rich businessmen, they were scared and closed their eyes. They didn't dare to look at the bloody picture. But from Dean's tone, it seemed that he was very calm. How many hardships did he go through to temper this calmness? She suppressed the pain in her chest. She looked at the clock on the wall and calculated the time. At the same time, she asked Crone to help her move Dean's body to the sofa. Once the anesthetic powder took effect, she would immediately start the operation. Dean asked Crone to put a pillow on his head so that he could see his abdomen. He also wanted to know if the cause of the disease was really the same as he guessed. The knife cut the abdomen, but there was no pain. Under the effect of the hemostatic powder, the blood didn't seep out too much. Jura's hand, that was holding the scalpel, trembled slightly. When the scalpel touched Dean's abdomen, there was a chill that spread along the scalpel. It was so cold that her fingers felt like they were on fire. She couldn't tell whether it was the burning sensation or the freezing pain. Chapter 414. He saw that under the skin layer of the abdomen, there was a layer of hardened crystals. The color of the crystals was dark red, like frozen blood. At the moment, it was like an armor covering the skin layer. At first glance, it seemed that the skin layer was just a set of soft clothes. Dean was startled, and there was a feeling of horror in his scalp. Young master. Krone's body trembled in fear. Jura's eyes were full of shock and confusion. She was stunned on the spot. Dean recovered and looked at her. What is this disease? Jura turned around and looked at him. Her eyes were full of confusion. She had never seen such a strange scene in her entire life. Under the skin layer was a hardened blood clot. Moreover, this blood clot was not an ordinary hardened blood clot. Its surface was extremely smooth. The most surprising thing was that there were orderly, undulating lines on it like scales. But the strangest thing was that the owner of the body was still alive in such a situation. I don't know. Jura looked down at the dark red crystals in front of her fingers. There was a complex look on her face. It should be because your body temperature is too low, which caused the blood to harden. But she didn't know what to say. She didn't dare to blindly diagnose a disease that she had never seen before. After all, she only had one life. Even if she inferred that it was due to the body temperature, she didn't know how to solve it. Dean's heart sank as he saw her expression. Is there no way? Jura slightly gritted her teeth. I'll try. She held the scalpel to expand the area of the skin layer. However, the skin layer outside the small intestine was cut open. It was full of dark red crystals. She tried to touch it gently, but found that it was extremely cold and hard. She even suspected that the knife may not be able to pierce through the strange, hardened blood. Auntie, is there no way to treat it? Krone, who was next to her, gradually adapted. He looked at Jura's bewildered appearance and said anxiously and nervously. Cold sweat oozed out of Jura's forehead. She hesitated for a moment. This thing must be removed. It may be a little painful. You have to endure it. Dean took a deep breath. You try first. I'll try to endure it. Jura nodded as she stared at Dean's abdomen. She found an edge and slowly stabbed the scalpel. The scalpel stabbed into the hardened blood. It was like stabbing ice. It made a very shallow mark. Dean saw the veins on her wrist gradually bulging. He knew that she had exerted a lot of strength. The hardness of the hardened blood was much harder than he had imagined. Although Jura was an ordinary person, but her strength was not small. But she couldn't pierce through the hardened blood. How could he cut it? Jura's strength gradually increased to about 70% or 80%, reaching the limit of her strength, but she still couldn't cut open the hardened blood. She couldn't help but loosen her hand and exhale. Her wrist was sore, but there was some fear and confusion in her heart. Something suddenly flashed in her mind. She was startled and turned to look at Dean. The confusion in her eyes gradually turned into fear and finally into self-blame and pain. Dean saw the sudden change in her appearance. He felt a trace of bad. Auntie, is this disease incurable? Jura's eyes turned red. Tears fell down. I have read in a medical book that there is a similar disease. It is extremely rare. There are very few people who have gotten such a rare disease since the birth of the giant wall. Dean's heart sank. What is this disease? Ice blood disease. Jura lowered her head. There was a crying tone in her voice. All the people who got ice blood disease eventually died. It is a rare terminal disease. Dean's heart sank. Terminal disease. This was tantamount to hearing that he had cancer. It was an instant despair. After his heart beat violently twice, the throbbing in the bottom of his heart gradually calmed down. In the old era, many cancers could be treated with the development of medical technology. The so-called terminal illness was just an illness that couldn't be cured in the medical field of a certain era. Since the ice blood disease was a terminal illness that couldn't be cured with the current medical conditions, he might be able to find a cure by relying on the knowledge in the super chip. Dean was silent for a moment. He looked at the crying Jura. Auntie, thank you. Help me sew it. Jura was already sobbing. Hearing Dean's words, she bit her lips and held back her sobs, but tears still rolled down from her eyes. She gritted her teeth and took out a needle and thread to sew Dean's skin layer. Her handwork was very delicate, and the sewing was seamless. Dean quietly looked at her. After she finished, he asked, Auntie, how long can I live with this disease? Jura's body slightly trembled as she bowed her head. The records are not detailed, but it should not be long, and She looked up at Dean. This disease is infectious. During this period, you better not drink with others. In addition, it is best not to let the Holy Church know that you have such a disease, otherwise you will be arrested and isolated. Infectious disease? Crone's face turned pale. He instinctively took a step back. Dean glanced at Crone. He looked at Jura. I know. Auntie, you go back first. Don't mention this to anyone. If someone asks, you just say that it's just a cold. Jura burst into tears. I'll stay and take care of you. Dean's face became indifferent. Crone, pay the medical fee and send the guest out. Crone had a complex expression as he pulled Jura out of the room. Dean slowly closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them again. His eyes were cold. He waited for Crone to come back. Give me the medical books in the bookcase. Crone was startled, but immediately went over to help him. Dean put a pillow on his back and began to read the medical books that he had brought back from the library. He was busy learning the knowledge from his super chip, so he didn't have time to read these books. The name ice blood disease was obviously the name of this era. Perhaps there was such a disease in the old era, but the name was different. He wanted to know the cause of this disease and what the final outcome would be. He flipped through the books one by one. Suddenly, Dean stopped at a certain page of an old medical book. This was the autobiography of an old doctor from hundreds of years ago. On a snowy day, he was invited by an aristocrat to go out to see a patient. The patient was a squire of the aristocrat family. The patient's body temperature was extremely low. After the initial diagnosis, the doctor decided to directly perform surgery to delay the squire's life. But after the operation, the doctor found that the servant's arm had long been frozen. The ice crystals were like fish scales, and there were progressive wavy lines. Ice blood disease. There was a trace of dignified look in Dean's eyes. The hardened blood under his abdomen had extremely regular lines. It was as if it was carefully carved by a carving knife. It was very similar to the servant from hundreds of years ago. The operation failed, and I was driven out of the aristocrat's house. Later, I mentioned the matter to my friend. Soon I heard that the Holy Church had sent people to search the aristocrat's house and arrested the sick servant. Dean carefully read line by line. From the description above, the Holy Church mentioned that the servant was suffering from a disease called ice blood disease. The name of this disease actually came from the Radiant Church. Dean was surprised. He thought that it was invented by the doctors. He didn't expect the Holy Church to take the lead in calling it out. Chapter 4:15. It's a pity that I don't have a microscope. Otherwise, I'd be able to figure out the reason for this hardened blood. If it's only frozen because of my abnormal body temperature, there shouldn't be these orderly lines. Or perhaps this hardened blood is not caused by my body temperature, but because of its appearance, my body temperature is too low. Dean frowned and sighed in his heart. It was a pipe dream to make a microscope with the current industrial technology. He looked at Crone, who was rummaging in the bookshelf. Find time to ask Noyce to bring back some medical books from various libraries. The more remote, the better. Don't use the basic ones. In addition, tell him not only to bring back medical books, but also other types of books. But don't bring too many. Just 1/5 of the medical books will do. Now our status is different. We have to be wary of villains. Our every move will be watched. But we must hide things that shouldn't be known by outsiders. Do you understand? Crone responded in doubt. He knew that Dudian chose Noyce because of his blonde hair, but he didn't understand why Dudian chose only 1/5 of the other books. Shouldn't the more the better? Crone knew that Dudian had chosen Noyce because of his blonde hair. He didn't ask because he knew that Dean wouldn't answer such a simple question. He had to figure out the answer himself. Crone found several medical books from the bookcase and put them in front of Dean. Dean was thinking as he flipped through the books. The source of the cold air comes from my abdomen. When I was captured by Splitter in his cave, Scar blocked Splitter's sharp blade for me. Scar cut off my waist and made a big hole in it. I was mixed with the corpses of other monsters, so the wound was infected by other monsters. Most of the people who got the ice blood disease in the past had contact with monsters. In the beginning, he had the immunity of the Defiler magic marks, so he didn't have any abnormalities. But since he had the Splitter magic marks, his body had changed. The last time he came back from the giant wall, he felt that his body was a bit cold. But he didn't have a solution, even though he knew the reason. Moreover, he didn't know how long he could live if he got this strange disease. God wants me to die prematurely. God is jealous of geniuses. Such a thing will fall on my head. God, don't you think too highly of me? Dean gently rubbed his fingers. There was a trace of coldness in his eyes. Several days passed in the blink of an eye. In the past few days, Noyce used Dean's identity to borrow a lot of books. Most of them were medical books. The rest were miscellaneous books. There were books about the history of the giant wall, the barbarians' history, the biographies of legendary inventions, the fragments of classical music masters, and so on. How is the Mellon Consortium these days? Dean casually asked Crone as he looked at the medical book in his hand. He tried to find the cause of the disease and diagnostic clues. He had no time to read the newspapers or understand the situation outside. Crone replied, Master, Mellon Consortium collapsed after the old patriarch George was imprisoned. The Mell family has also plummeted. Their industries have been boycotted by the people. They're losing money every day. Many hotels, theaters, and other places in residential areas have been destroyed by mobs. It is estimated that they won't be able to hold on for long. Tell old Feline to seize the opportunity. If the people's anger subsides, then it will take a lot of effort to completely destroy the Mell family. Dean said. Crone nodded as he sighed in his heart. He was a famous aristocrat in the outer wall, but now he was reduced to this point. He recalled the time when a little gardener of the Mell family went to the orphanage for adoption. He had the most prominent identity and was the object that everyone wanted to adopt. However, he was an old aristocrat after all. He didn't collapse even under the pressure of Dean. If it was any other small aristocrat, then their whole family would have been in prison by now. He said that it is forbidden to touch the soul crystal if there's a wound on his hand, so as to avoid being trapped inside the soul crystal. Unexpectedly, Dean was startled as he saw a medical case. It was about a clergyman infected with ice blood disease. You need to take a lot of sugar. The staple food is beef. Take the medicine on time. You can live for 2 years or 1 week. If you don't pay attention to keeping warm, then your body temperature will be too low. Avoid touching cold water, black snow. Dean was struck by lightning as he read the last part of the case. 2 years at most. Short 1 week. Isn't this the same as terminal cancer in the old era? He was stunned for a moment. He looked down again and again until he was sure that he wasn't wrong. He was at a loss. Did it mean that he had less than 2 years left? 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. Countless sketches flashed through his mind. Each of them was the ideal in his heart. However, there was no way to realize these ideals. His heart was empty, and he was in a daze. Crone's face changed as he saw Dean's strange reaction. He looked at the book in Crone's hand and carefully asked, Master, what's wrong? Dean's eyes gradually focused. He was silent for a moment. It's nothing. You go out first. Crone was worried. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. He turned and left. He gently closed the door and quietly waited outside. Dean looked at the distance in a daze. His eyes were filled with confusion. A long time passed. The scenery outside gradually darkened. The night was reflected in his eyes. It seemed to add a bit of light. His eyes gradually recovered from the numbness. He looked down at the book in his hand. Sugar, beef, these are all high-calorie foods. According to the book, if I eat these high-calorie foods, I can suppress the outbreak time of the ice blood disease. If I eat food with more calories than sugar and beef, it should not be difficult for me to live for 2 years, or even longer. The people who got ice blood disease shouldn't be as strong as me. If my physique is higher, then my resistance will be enhanced. Maybe I can hold on for a longer time. Thinking of this, the despair in his heart gradually recovered a strong hope and desire, as well as a longing for life. In 2 years' time, I will master the medicine of the old era. Then I will try my best to find a solution. Even cancer has been solved. What is this? Terminal disease? It's just that it's an incurable disease in relative terms. Since it's called an incurable disease under such simple conditions, I'll change the world in these simple conditions. I'll make it an ordinary disease that can be easily treated. Dean's eyes glowed with tenacity. When he was captured by the splitter in the cave, he survived. How could he admit defeat for this little disease? Crone, Dean called out. Crone, who was guarding outside the door, hurriedly pushed the door. Master, I'm here. In the future, my clothes will be made of the best thermal materials, including my armor. Dean said, in addition, from today on, I will eat a piece of tooth crab rib for every meal. Crone was surprised. Tooth crab? Master, this is one of the most expensive ingredients. It's taken from the front rib of the monster tooth crab. An adult tooth crab's front rib is only half a caddy. It's only enough for one meal. Tooth crab is rare and difficult to catch. Nobles will snatch it as soon as it appears. They have to eat it every meal. Is it difficult? Dean's face turned cold. Even if I have to sell dragon meat, I have to buy it. If anyone doesn't want to sell, then I will grab it. Chapter 416. Crone smiled as he hesitated. I'll try my best, master. It's not your best, but it's a must. Dudian added. In addition to the tooth crab rib, my tableware needs to be made by the most expensive master. The water I drink must be purified water that has been repeatedly filtered. Crone was startled. He wanted to ask Dudian if there were any benefits to eating the tooth crab rib, but now it seemed that it was purely a matter of Dudian's own preference. Would people become so extravagant after they become rich and famous? He bowed his head. Master, do you have any other orders? Dean thought for a moment. Inform the temple that I want the temperature in the lecture hall to be higher on the day of my public lecture. You can think about the reason yourself. I know. I'll keep it a secret. Crone nodded with a trace of worry in his eyes. Young master, are you feeling better? Teaching is very tiring. Can you bear it? I won't fall that easily. Go and call Artemis. Yes, master. Father, is Grandpa really not able to be bailed out? Sarah looked at Mark. Her eyes were red and swollen. She was full of pain and remorse. Mark sighed. I have contacted several generals in the military. It's impossible to bail him out. They can only let him live a better life in prison. He won't be humiliated. Sarah's tears fell as she clenched her fists and said, Father, let's send someone to assassinate him. Ron must have been ambushed by him. This time we will send everyone and certainly kill him. As long as he is dead, sooner or later we will be able to restore our original state. Then we will be able to bring Grandpa back. Stupid. Mark angrily rebuked her. Have you forgotten what I taught you in the past? The more dangerous the situation is, the calmer you are. Remorse and pain won't let you act recklessly. Assassinate him? Have you investigated how many people are protecting him in the dark? The military, the magistrate, the Holy Church, none of them will let him die. If he dies now, it doesn't matter if we kill him or not. We will be the first to bear their wrath. The Holy Church alone is enough to exterminate our entire race. Sarah's body trembled. The word extermination shook her heart. She instantly sobered up. Father, Mark coldly snorted. I have investigated in the past few days. On the day of Ron's accident, one of the two senior knights left the castle and went to the Moulin Rouge to have fun. The only one left was the woman who used to be a gold medal punisher. It's impossible to stop Ron unless there was a sneak attack, or there are other masters hidden in this kid's hands. That person is probably the old butler. Sarah was startled. Father, you mean say that he has 3 senior knight powerhouses helping him? Not bad. Moreover, this kid is an intermediate hunter. Coupled with a magic mark, he can barely fight against an ordinary senior hunter. If you want to kill him, then you need to gather all the experts of the 2 consortiums. Mark's eyes were cold, but there are many ways to kill him besides the sword. I have posted a reward notice in the Dark Church. Whoever can kill him will get 5 million gold coins. Even if we keep this money, sooner or later it will be nibbled away by the kid. He won't let us go. Either he dies or we die. Sarah took a deep breath. Father, you actually asked the Dark Church for help? Mark looked at her coldly. What? Do you think it will dirty your hands if you don't use such a good sword? No, it's not. Sarah continued. It's just that in this sensitive period, if the Holy Church finds out, Mark sneered, Holy Church? What we merchants sell are real goods. The Radiant Church is quite smart. They sell some imaginary things. Only these fools would believe them and willingly give them money. Sarah's face changed. Father, do you think the Dark Church has the ability to kill him? The strength of 3 senior knights is equivalent to the strength of most consortiums, Mark indifferently said. Even if they can't kill him, they can make him live cautiously. Don't underestimate the Dark Church. They have vicious potioneers and alchemists. It's impossible to guard against them. Unless the Holy Church sends a group of guys to guard him, otherwise he will die. When Sarah heard this, she was relieved. Her eyes flashed with a trace of resentment. What about the recent divestment? We don't have much time. Old Feline has swallowed up our industry. If there isn't much left, then we should throw it all away. Mark changed the topic. Father, it's useless. He said that he won't see me again. It's useless even if I beg him. Ginny was dressed in the robes of a priest. Her eyes were red as she looked at her father in front of her, who had recently become thin and seemed to have experienced some vicissitudes of life. Rudolph sighed. Melon Consortium is finished. Mel family will also be finished. Bourong family won't be able to escape this calamity. Only you can resolve the hatred in his heart. Otherwise, our Bourong family will be completely destroyed by him. Ginny bit her lower lip as she lowered her head. Miss, please help me. I'm begging you to, the housekeeper said as he knelt down and begged. Ginny hurried to help him. Uncle, don't be like this. Miss, I won't get up if you don't go. The butler begged as he knelt down. Ginny hurriedly said, Please get up first. Rudolph quietly looked at the scene. After a moment, he sighed. Get up. The butler was startled as he looked at him. Rudolph waved to Ginny. Ginny hesitated for a moment, then slowly walked towards him. Tell Dad that you really don't want to see him. Rudolph stroked her hair as he whispered. Ginny pursed her lips and clenched her teeth to prevent herself from crying. She said, I can't go back with him anymore. Rudolph took her into his arms and gently patted her shoulder. He sighed and whispered, If you don't want to go back, then don't go. I won't force you. I won't force you to do things you don't want to do. As long as you are happy and do what you really like to do, you don't need to worry about the family. I will handle it. Ginny burst into tears as she choked with sobs. This is the bitter fruit that I have sown. Since the business failed, then I should bear the losses. Rudolph gently stroked Ginny's hair. I don't believe that I can't make the Bourong family rise again in the next 20 or 30 years of my life. Ginny wiped her tears as she looked up at him. I will work hard with you. Rudolph was startled. His eyes were slightly sparkling as he looked up and laughed. Well, let's work hard together. The butler hurriedly said after Ginny left. Master, the situation is critical now. That kid will be more powerful after the public lecture. He will crush us easily. Why did you stop Miss from interceding? Interceding will only make us more humble. Rudolph's smile disappeared as he slowly said, Moreover, he climbed all the way from prison to his current position. What did he rely on? It's not love, but hate. Hate can make a person crazy. The motivation of hatred is far stronger than love. Chapter 417. Master, what do you mean? The butler was confused. Rudolph continued. Do you really think that he wants to retaliate against the Melon Consortium? Yes, everyone thinks so, but everyone is wrong. He doesn't want to deal with us because of resentment. He has no choice but to deal with us. The Melon Consortium is his only enemy. Moreover, it is an irreconcilable enemy. If he chooses to deal with other people, then he will have one more enemy. So he can only compete with the Melon Consortium. The choice is not his hands. Moreover, in the eyes of the other consortiums, this is something that they are happy to see. If there is a chance, they might even help him and make this knife sharper. The butler was startled. After a moment, he sighed. Master, he has changed from a weapon to a master. The Melon family has fallen. The next one will be us. Rudolph slowly said, Have you ever thought why the Mel family was the first to fall and not our Bourong family? The butler's eyes lit up. Master, are you saying that he still has feelings for Miss? That's why he didn't deal with us? If that's the case, doesn't that mean we can still? Rudolph squinted at him. When did you become so stupid? The butler was stunned. Do you really think that this monster still has feelings in his heart? Do you think that feelings can affect his judgment? Rudolph said in a cold voice. The butler's face slightly changed. Master, if he doesn't have feelings for Miss, then what is the reason? Rudolph said, there are two reasons for this. The first one is that he has feelings for Near. But in my opinion, this possibility is so low that it can be ignored. Therefore, it can only be the second reason, and this reason also fits with his style of doing things. The second reason? In the past, he was just a weapon. The Scott Consortium was willing to help him in his fight against the Melon Consortium. Other consortia were willing to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. If necessary, they would secretly help him. But now it's different. As you said, he has turned from a weapon to a master. Now that he is in the spotlight, he will have to face the attacks of other masters. Rudolph slowly said, for him the real battlefield has just begun. The other consortia won't tolerate the growth of such a monster. The military won't allow it, and the Holy Church won't allow it. Once the New World Consortium continues to expand, it will annex the other 5 consortia. Then even the Holy Church and the military will have to step back. At that time, he will no longer be a small consortium. He will be able to influence the structure of the military and the Holy Church. No matter which side he goes to, the other side will be a threat. This is not the situation that the military and the Holy Church are willing to see. The butler was startled. Master, you mean to say that the reason why he dealt with the Mel family is not because he is merciful to us, but because he wants to defeat the Melon Consortium first? He wants to get rid of an enemy, so that he won't be besieged by the other consortia? Yes, Rudolph said, the Mel family is in charge of the Melon Consortium. If the Mel family falls, then the Melon Consortium will disband. Now that he's a double legendary master, any financial group that he joins will become the target of public criticism. Of course, this doesn't mean that he's a disaster for the financial group. On the contrary, he'll become a target that everyone hopes to rope in. However, if he's bound to a financial group, he'll become a thorn in everyone's side. The butler understood. Everyone knows about his relationship with the New World Financial Group. He's tied to the New World Financial Group. It's not a cooperative relationship that can be severed based on interests alone. In this way, the New World Financial Group will be attacked by all the other financial groups, including the military and the Radiant Church, who will secretly suppress them, right? The military and the Holy Church won't take action for the time being. The next situation will depend on his own performance. Rudolph said, nothing will happen if he is willing to be a consortium. But if he doesn't know his place, then he will be finished no matter if he is a master or not. After all, these titles are just a title created by the people in power. If his existence violates the rights of the people in power, then he can only swallow the bitter fruit. In short, he shouldn't care about us at this time. But we have to make a stand. Since doesn't want to go and apologize, then you will go on her behalf. Rudolph nodded. Me? Remember to prepare a gift. We will use all our properties in the commercial district as a congratulatory gift. The butler was shocked. Master, how go? Is there any news from the Ryan family in the last 2 days? Dean casually asked as he flipped through the book. Crone shook his head, no. Dean nodded and handed him a drawing. Give this to the Ryan family. Tell them to build it before sunset. Crone took a look. It turned out to be a huge cage. He was surprised, but didn't ask anything. He turned away and left. Dean called Nicholas after Crone left. There are a few people in the Melon Consortium. I need you to help me find them. You used to be a butler of the upper class, so I will leave this matter to you. They are my friends, so try to protect them and don't let them get hurt. Nicholas was surprised. I know. He turned away and left. After a moment, Crone returned and said, Master, Noyce personally sent a message. Do you still want to eat toothed crab ribs tonight? Sergei went to several markets today, but they didn't sell it. Dean raised his eyebrows. Don't tell me that the entire outer wall doesn't sell it and you're looking for suppliers? As long as there is one, then send it to my table. Do you understand? Crone scratched his head and said, Young master, I heard that the Brandon family bought several toothed crabs for the banquet tonight. Go and buy them. Dean interrupted him. Crone carefully said, But master, the Brandon family is an upper-class aristocrat. They have a lot of properties under their command. If they don't want to sell. Chapter 418. Master, won't we offend people? Crone asked in a weak voice. Dudeen indifferently said, If I offended you, then I offended you. Just do it. All right. Crone didn't expect Dudeen to be so persistent about food. Should I ask Sergei to buy it now? Tell Noise to go with him. Dudeen said. Tell him to let the other party offer a price first. If he doesn't sell, then we will rob him. I want to see if he has the guts to not sell. Okay. Crone came to the hall and passed Dudeen's words to Sergei and Noise. Sergei asked, Did he really say that he will rob if he doesn't sell? Yes. Crone was very sure. Sergei was stunned. I didn't expect him to be a foodie. All right. I promise to bring it back for him. Sergei patted Noise's shoulder and called him to take the horse. Both of them rode out of the castle and headed towards the Brandon family's territory. Linner, is the hall ready? Cage came down the stairs and looked at the busy attendants in the magnificent hall. He asked a tall girl who was talking to her maid. The girl was about 18 or 19 years old. She was wearing a luxurious golden dress, which was embellished with countless crystal lights. It was extremely dazzling. One didn't need to think to know that this expensive evening dress was made by a master tailor. Father, it's almost ready. We're just waiting for the guests to arrive. When Lin Na heard her father's words, she gracefully walked over with a smile on her face. Cage laughed and said, Your Uncle William is coming today. I heard that his son is now a second-level knight of light in the temple. He also likes Mr. Hemming's music, which is the same as you. You should talk more about it at the banquet. Linner's face turned red. Dad, what are you talking about? Today's banquet is obviously prepared for you and Uncle William to congratulate him for his promotion. How can it be related to me? Silly child. Cage laughed. At this time, a middle-aged butler in a black tuxedo quietly came out of the crowd. He bowed and said, Master, there are two people outside who want to see you. They claim to be Master Dean's attendants. Master Dean? Cage was surprised. Lena's eyes lit up as she looked at the butler. Is it the genius Master Dean? The housekeeper said respectfully, Yes, Mississippi, is it really him? Lena was a little excited. She grabbed Cage's hand and said, Father, did you inform him? Is he also here to congratulate Uncle William? Cage was puzzled, but when he heard her words, his heart moved. He said to the housekeeper, Let them in. Yes, master. The butler turned and left. Lin Na's eyes were filled with excitement as she looked at the back of the housekeeper. Dad, it's my birthday in a few days. Can you invite Master due to my birthday party? If he appears, my friends will be envious of me. I heard that Master Dean is not only skilled in divine arts, but he is also a gold knight. He is handsome and knows how to compose poems. He is perfect, Cage helplessly said. Don't think too much about it. Our Brandon family can't climb up to such a person. Lena slightly pouted as she heard her father pour cold water on her. What are you thinking about? I didn't say that I want to find him. I'm his admirer. I just want to see him in person. Cage helplessly shook his head and didn't say anything. At this moment, the butler returned from outside, followed by two tall and burly figures. One had golden hair, and the other had a burly figure. Judging from their clothes, they were indeed servants. He glanced at them and noticed that the two did not bring any gifts. His heart was slightly moved. Greetings, Mr. Brandon Cage. Sergei politely said as he came in front of Cage. Cage smiled. Both of you are too polite. Please sit down. No need. Sergei whispered as he saw that no one was paying attention to them. Patriarch Cage, our young master asked us to visit you and ask for something. Ask for something? Cage was slightly startled. He asked calmly, What is it? Tooth crab. Sergei calmly said, Our young master has recently fallen in love with some delicious food. We have searched everywhere and heard that the last tooth crab in the market was bought by your servant. So we have come to ask for it. Patriarch Cage, please rest assured that we will pay 3 times the price for it. I hope you can help us. Cage and Lena looked at each other. They never thought that the other person would come to ask for an ingredient. So he likes to eat toothed crabs. Lena secretly noted this down, and her heart rippled. Cage slightly frowned as he pondered. Nowadays, the situation outside was in constant turmoil. He knew that this talented young master was the main force that defeated the Melon Consortium. Every time a behemoth fell, the dust would cover the eyes of many people. However, the Brandon family was a powerful family. They knew what kind of changes would occur in the pattern of the commercial district. Patriarch, Sergei asked again as he saw that Cage didn't speak. Cage took a look at him and hesitated for a while. Then he said in a deep voice, "Go back and tell Master Du that this is an item for tonight's banquet. I'm sorry that I can't resell it. If Master Du likes it, I'll find it in a few days and send it to him." Sergei raised his eyebrows. "Patriarch, you are too stingy. We're only asking for an ingredient. Moreover, we are asking for 3 times the price. Is the face of our young master so worthless? Or are you not going to give him face?" Lena didn't expect her father to refuse. She pulled her father's arm. "Dad, give it to them. We can replace it with something else." "No." Cage's attitude was tough. "This is the rule of our family. Moreover, the menu has been published. How can we change it at will?" Sergei narrowed his eyes. "Is that so? Patriarch, can you let us see the tooth crab? Isn't this request too much?" Cage's face softened. "No problem. I will personally take you to see it." He turned around and led the way. Sergei winked at Noyce. Noyce understood and said, "I'll wait for you here." Sergei nodded and followed Noyce to the kitchen. Cage ordered the chef to bring out the tooth crab. Sergei looked at it. It was a black crab with a big head. The difference between it and ordinary crab is that it has sharp teeth. It specializes in eating underwater fish. It can even eat big fish. Because of this, the cost of raising it is very expensive. Moreover, it is easy to have accidents when fishing. Therefore, it is rare in number. Only a few people are willing to breed it. Most of the tooth crabs are wild in the radiation area or in some desolate lakes. It's cute. Sergei reached out to touch it. Cage raised his eyebrows. He felt that the servant's behavior was somewhat frivolous. At this time, Sergei quickly grabbed the box containing the tooth crab. He easily knocked away the 2 chefs next to him. He turned around and ran away. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the night. Cage was stunned. All of this happened as fast as lightning. He didn't react for a long time. After Sergei ran for some distance, he recovered. He couldn't help but shout, "Catch him!" The surrounding servants immediately chased after him. Sergei's speed was extremely fast. He directly jumped over the wall of the manor. Whoosh! A figure quickly chased after him. Sergei looked back and laughed. "If you can catch up, then I will give it to you." He quickly entered the street outside. The figure chased after him at full speed. His speed was comparable to Sergei's. He stopped for a moment and turned back to the castle. He didn't want to lure the tiger away from the mountain. That night, there was a sensational news from the Brandon family. Someone had robbed the food for the banquet. The person claimed to be Dean's servant. Under the cover of the night, the news spread like a spider's web through the intricate and complicated intelligence network. Chapter 419. Master, Sergei and the others are back. Crone respectfully said. Dudian asked while reading the book, "Did you buy it?" "I didn't buy it." They snatched it back. Crone secretly looked at him. "Oh, go and do it. I'm hungry." Dudian's plate was filled with fried teeth crab ribs. Others' plates were filled with high-quality beef. He asked Crone while eating, "I'll be teaching in a few days. Have you contacted the tailor for warm clothes?" "Yes, they are working on it." Crone replied. Dudian nodded and looked at the oil on the plate. "I'll use rhinoceros tiger oil or walleye fish oil. I'll prepare it tomorrow." Crone was startled but whispered. Sergei looked at Dudian. "You have been feeling better in the last 2 days. Don't tell me that you ate this thing. You weren't so picky before." Dudian glanced at him but was too lazy to answer. He ate a few pieces of teeth crab ribs. He felt the coldness in his body was alleviated. He got up and said, "Crone, come to my study room after dinner." Oh. Crone quickly finished his dinner after Dudian left. He came to Dudian's study room. "Master, what can I do for you?" "Come in." Crone pushed the door and saw Dudian sitting in front of the desk, writing something. He didn't ask anything, but quietly waited for Dudian to finish writing. He shook the paper in his hand. The ink absorption effect of the snow paper was very good. He handed it to Crone. This is my menu in the future. All the ingredients will be selected from this list. If the market is out of stock, then go and buy it. If the market isn't selling, then rob it. Crone looked at it and was speechless. He felt a chill in his throat and said, "Young master, will you only choose from this?" "Yes." Crone felt a little weak. He had never heard of the names of many of the ingredients on the list, but some of the ingredients he had heard of were all precious and expensive top-notch ingredients. Even the most famous hotels might not be able to afford them. For example, toothed crabs, which were rare and expensive. A toothed crab was equivalent to the savings of an ordinary family for 7 or 8 years. In addition to the tooth crab, there was also the lake toad. It was a relatively rare, edible monster. Moreover, he also saw Kamisai caviar and Snow Mountain truffles on the menu. The former was a well-known, top-notch delicacy that ordinary nobles couldn't afford, let alone the latter. Even if one had the money, one couldn't buy it. It was a natural ingredient that would only appear during the coldest days of the black snow season every year, but to encounter it required luck. As a result, many commoners would station themselves in the northern snowy mountains to search for Snow Mountain truffles during the black snow season. As long as they found the authentic truffles, they would become rich overnight. However, the process of searching for truffles was extremely dangerous, and many people died every year. Crone was shocked. He slowly put away the expensive menu. "Master, some of these ingredients are very complicated. We don't have a professional chef. Even if we buy them, we won't be able to handle them well. It's easy to waste them. Do you want to hire one?" Dudian replied, "The hired person isn't trustworthy. In a few days, there will be a new partner joining us. Buy some ingredients that are easy to make." Crone was startled. "I know. Mr. Chai, that's it. Do you think I should send someone to ask him for an explanation?" Cage slowly narrated what had happened and asked the middle-aged man in front of him. Chai's eyes flashed as he held a glass of red wine in his hand. "I have already heard about this matter. The 2 men are indeed his attendants. He connived his men to rob us because he wanted to see our reaction. I didn't expect that he would move on to our Scott consortium. He really doesn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth." Cage frowned. "Our consortium has cooperated with him many times. We shouldn't have offended him. Why did he choose us?" Chai narrowed his eyes. "It should be about the new textile machine. This kid is quite vengeful." "New textile machine?" Cage was startled for a moment. The new textile machine had tampered with their share. However, we only reduced their share for the first 2 months. After that, we still gave them the usual share. Why would they fall out with us? When he bailed out the senior hunter called Sergei, he offended the crew of consortium. Why didn't he retaliate against them? Chai was silent for a moment. "We can't let this matter go. Since he wants to test our reaction, then we will let him see. You go back and send someone to his door to ask for an explanation. I want to see how he will respond." "I know." Cage nodded. "Huashan Consortium. Wallace family. Master, I just got the information that the Dark Church has issued a high reward for the assassination of the Genius Master." The butler said in a very light voice. "Master, should we secretly push it?" Hank folded the newspaper in his hand and smiled. "No need. This kid is too young. He has just swallowed the Melon Consortium and hasn't digested it yet. Now he has provoked the Scott Consortium. I thought that he would form an alliance with the Scott Consortium. It seems that I was worried for nothing. I remember that the Scott Consortium had tampered with the new textile machine. I wanted to give this to him to sow discord between them. It seems that he already knows about this matter." The butler looked at the newspaper in Hank's hand and said, "He picked the banquet to cause trouble for the Brandon family. Is he trying to test the reaction of the Scott Consortium? The Brandon family has lost their face. They will certainly look for him for an explanation. Let's see how he responds. Master, what about our previous plan? Put it aside for the time being. We will wait until they are tired, and then we will act." Green Consortium. Croton family. Pass down the order. All the properties in the civilian area will remain the same. The previous plan will be temporarily canceled. I want to observe the situation. Curtin Steve tapped his thigh and took a sip of coffee as he spoke to a well-dressed young man beside him. The young man was startled. Yes, master. Chapter 420. Master, the cage you want to build is cast. Crone went upstairs to report to Dudian. Dudian nodded slightly. His eyes didn't leave the book. Let Sergei send it to the giant wall. Moreover, call Patriarch Feline to come over. There are important things to discuss. Yes, master. Crone turned away. Ryan family's carriage stopped in front of the castle after half a day. Old Feline and Sander got off together. There were 3 knight attendants. 1 was a gold knight, and 2 were silver knights. Weapons are not allowed in the hall. Noyce, who was on duty at the door, stopped them. The 3 knights frowned and turned to look at Old Feline. Old Feline nodded. The 3 knights frowned but still took off their weapons and handed them to Noyce. Patriarch Feline, please. Master has been waiting for you for a long time. Crone invited Old Feline in a humble manner. Old Feline nodded and indicated that the 3 knights didn't need to follow him. He held Sander's wrist and asked him to help him to go upstairs. Sander hesitated, but silently helped Old Feline. Crone opened the door and looked at Dudian. Master, Patriarch Feline has arrived. You go out first. Dudian didn't look up. Crone nodded and gestured to Old Feline and Dudian to enter the room. He quietly closed the door and waited for them to enter the room. It's so warm here. Old Feline looked at the fireplace and smiled at Dudian. Dudian used a pen to make a mark on the paper. He folded the corner and closed the book. He looked at Old Feline, who was sitting on the sofa, and Sander, who was standing next to him. He smiled. Patriarch, I haven't seen you for a few days. How are you? I'm quite healthy. Old Feline laughed and leaned his crutches against the sofa. He looked at Dudian. I heard that you had a friction with the Brandon family yesterday. Do you need me to help you settle it? That's not why I called you here. Dean smiled, got up, and tightened his coat. He came to the sofa and sat down. He took out the tea leaves from the drawer under the coffee table. He picked up the thermal teapot and gently brewed a cup of tea. First, he washed the tea, shook it, and brewed it. He poured the water into the tea gutter and filtered it into the sink under the table. Then he filled it with tea. The fragrance of the tea was refreshing. Old Feline was surprised. If your hair wasn't black, I would have suspected that you were born in a noble family. Dean smiled and poured himself a cup. Everyone can learn etiquette. If the library is open to civilians, then the so-called untouchables in the eyes of the aristocracy will be much less. Old Feline smiled but didn't reply. Dean didn't intend to talk about this matter in depth. He went straight to the point. Patriarch, how is the recovery of the Melon Consortium? Everyone pushes the wall when it's down. Old Feline took a sip of tea and whispered, Under your banner, the aristocrats of the Melon Consortium have withdrawn their investment and joined our consortium. But a small part of them have been poached by other consortiums. As for the rest, they won't be able to resist for long. They have framed you and caused public anger. So the people have boycotted all the industries under the Melon Consortium. You know, if you don't make a profit, then it's equal to a loss. If they continue to lose money, then they will soon collapse. Dean nodded. What about the Mel family? That old guy George went to prison. There is no way to bail him out. The prestige of Mel family is not as good as it used to be. It has changed from a bright star to a dim meteorite overnight. The only shining sparks are the friction caused by the rapid fall. Old Feline smiled. The Melon Consortium is completely unable to make a comeback. The Mel family is preparing to declare bankruptcy and start all over again. Dean nodded. We have to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Old Feline looked at him. I will. After stabilizing the industries of the Melon Consortium, we will manage it well. Dean took a sip of his tea. From now on, I won't provide any practical help to the consortium. Everything will depend on you, Patriarch. Old Feline was startled. This? Why? Sandro, who was at the side, was also taken aback. He asked anxiously, Yes, why? Our momentum is good. The people believe in us. We can attack any consortium, and they won't be able to fight back. If you provide us with inventions in the future, we can even rule the outer wall. Dean looked up at him. Rule the outer wall? You guys are thinking quite far ahead. Don't forget, above the financial groups are the military and the Vatican. Sandro was stunned, and asked in confusion, "The military and the church? They won't intervene in this matter. Moreover, we have annexed other consortiums, so they can't do anything to us." Dean looked at old Feline. "Patriarch, it seems that the outside world is calm. There are only sounds of us nibbling at the Melon Consortium. However, the other consortiums are ready to go. If we continue to expand, then the military and the Holy Church won't sit idly by. They need balance, and we will break the balance. That's why the temple forbids the masters to have close contact with the aristocracy. Even the masters from the aristocracy can't open the back door to provide unbalanced help to their families. Of course, there are inevitably some masters who have close relationships with consortiums over the years, but they only help a little. If they really sell divine spells to consortiums time and time again and provide too much help, the temple will not turn a blind eye to it. You should understand the stakes involved." Old Feline looked at Dean. "According to you, we won't compete with other consortiums in the future. But what if other consortiums compete with us? We'll fight in whatever way we should." Dean said, "If they find fault with us, then we will fight back. There will inevitably be frictions and conflicts in business. But I won't do anything. Do you understand that I'm the one who will crush the scales? But don't worry. Although I won't help, but everyone knows that I'm from the New World Consortium. You have done me a great favor, so they won't provoke you too much. Moreover, you can use my reputation to operate. It's more than enough to deal with the other consortiums." Old Feline sighed. There was regret and unwillingness in his heart. However, he was aware of the urgency of the situation. Although it was the universal truth to strive to move up, but if he continued to move forward, he might fall off the cliff. And the cliff was in front of them. "I know. Don't worry. Even if you don't help us, as long as you are alive, we only need to borrow your reputation to become the biggest commercial plutocrat in the commercial district," Old Feline said. Dean smiled and continued to pour tea for him. "What are you going to do in the future if you don't create inventions?" Old Feline asked while drinking tea. Dean smiled. "There are a lot of things I can do. With my current status, I'm already a master of my faction. Once my gas faction is stabilized, then my status will be much higher than that of a legendary master. I'm afraid that I'll destroy the world if I continue to study." Destroy the world? Old Feline and Sander were surprised. Wasn't this a bit too big? Dean didn't elaborate. "I will teach and train a group of excellent students. Even if one day I'm gone, no one will dare to touch the New World Consortium as long as they are there." "That's true." Old Feline nodded. "You are very young, but your thinking is very far. I'm an old man who has half of my body in the soil. I haven't thought about what will happen after death." Dean glanced at Zendral and smiled. "The plan is always long-term." Old Feline sighed. "We may be able to go further if there is no suppression from the military and the Holy Church. Unfortunately, the system of the world is like this. You can't climb up just because you have the ability. No one is willing to share their bowl of meat with others. We are the same. We trample on the people who have the hope to climb up under our feet. We don't want them to threaten us. The temple is better. As long as a genius like you has the talent, you will be able to stand out. Your talent won't be buried." Dean's heart was touched. In fact, any system is the same. If you want to climb up, then it's not enough to be stronger than others. You have to be much stronger in order to rush up. Old Feline sighed. A supreme ruler often needs several generations of contacts and wealth accumulation to turn over. Our foundation is too thin compared to the Holy Church, which has existed for hundreds of years. I hope that the next generation can really rise." Dean looked at him. "Patriarch, you are old, but your heart isn't. If the heart is old, then it's useless." Dean received the news that the Bourong family had come to visit after sending off Old Feline. Dean didn't bother to see them, so Crone was in charge. "Master, the people from the Bourong family have returned. They came to send gifts. This is their gift." Crone came to the study room and handed a gift box to Dean. The gift box was opened, and there was a contract inside. "I was worried that it was a dangerous item, so I opened it without authorization." Crone explained. Dean said, "Check in front of me." "Yes, master." Chapter 421. Give this to old Feline. Tell him to send people to recover the land. Dean threw the contract to Crone. Also send a letter to the Bourong family. Don't let me hear the words Bourong family again. Otherwise, I'll make them completely disappear from the commercial district. Crone took the contract. He didn't dare to ask more, but bowed his head. Dean continued to read the book after Crone left. Holy Church, military. Their foundation should be in the inner wall. I have to know their details if I want to defeat them. Dean's eyes lit up. Inner wall. It's time to take a look. Dean had just finished his lunch when he heard the sound of a carriage coming from outside the manor. Dean looked through the window and saw that it was his family's carriage. At this time, the door of the carriage was pushed open. Nicholas's figure slowly came down from the carriage. He turned around and made a gentleman's invitation gesture. Several figures jumped down from the carriage. Dean stood up and strode towards the door. Gwyneth, who was next to him, wasn't scared by his sudden movement. She put down the knife and followed behind Dean like a shadow. She was waiting for him at the door. Dean! A few figures jumped down from the carriage. One of them was a burly teenager. He was overjoyed when he saw Dean. He shouted from afar and ran towards him. Dean smiled. The burly teenager threw himself into Dean's arms and gave him a big hug. I haven't seen you for a few years. You've grown a lot. Dean loosened his hand and hammered the teenager's chest. The burly teenager was his best friend from the scavenger training, Mason. Mason grinned and said, I have heard that you are now a very powerful master. The newspapers are full of news about you every day. Among us brothers, you are the best. Not only have you become a master, but you are also a golden knight of the Knight's Hall. I heard that a golden knight is much more powerful than a hunter. Even a senior hunter of a consortium may not be able to beat a golden knight. Mason grinned and said, How can it be compared to your changes? I have heard that you are now a very powerful master. Dean shook his head. I'm a golden knight. There's a difference between an honorary knight and a real golden knight. In short, there's a difference between me and a real golden knight. There are so many crooked things. I want to know whether an honorary knight is powerful or not. Of course. Dean laughed. Gwyneth looked at the back of the teenager in front of her. There was a trace of surprise in her eyes. She had followed Dean for a long time. She knew that the latter paid great attention to his identity and manners. She didn't expect him to say such vulgar words. Mason, you bastard! How can you run so fast? A shout came from behind. Dean and Macon looked over and saw a handsome teenager supporting a plain-dressed teenager with an ordinary face. They were coming together. Zach! Sham? Dean was startled. Although a few years had passed and they had grown a lot, but there was still the shadow of their childhood. However, he noticed that Sham's leg was broken. Moreover, it was sawed off from the thigh, and the lower half did not have a prosthesis. Dean! Zach laughed as he helped Sham to come over. Sham saw that Dean was wearing simple but luxurious clothes. There was a bit of shame on his face. He couldn't help but say, Dean is a master of the temple and a golden knight. We can't call him Dean anymore. Zach responded, Yes. Let's call him Master Dean. What do you think? Mason looked at the two. What nonsense are you talking about? It's awkward. Dean is called Dean. Why are you calling him like an outsider? Am I right, Dean? Dean sobered up. Whatever you want to call me. Sham, what happened to your leg? This, Zach said. We were attacked by a monster when we were scavenging. Sham's leg was bitten and infected with a highly toxic poison. We couldn't detoxify it, so we cut off his leg and saved his life. The smile on Sham's face was somewhat forced as he said, It's good to be cut off. I have no value. I was fired by the consortium, but I can go back to my hometown to help my father take care of the pub. Although I haven't done anything, but at least my physique is a bit stronger than ordinary people. In my area, I'm known as the One-Leg King. Macon laughed and said, Then if we go, wouldn't we be the king of legs? Sham snappily said, I'll make you a ham king. Zach clapped his hands. I agree. Dean smiled. After a few years, they were still as close as before. However, Sham seemed to have changed. In his mind, although he could trust all three of them, but there were differences. Mason was the one he trusted the most, followed by Sham. His mind was flexible, but he was honest. Zack was a bit irritable and selfish, although he had nothing to say to them. But to outsiders, he was the type of person who would not help others. Everything was based on his own interests, although he has now become such a person. But in the beginning, he preferred to talk to Sham. But this time, his feeling has changed. Zack seems to have become a lot more generous. Mason is still as heartless as before, but Sham seems to be a lot more sophisticated, hiding some things in his heart. Perhaps this was the reason why he was fired by the consortium. It was inevitable that things would become complicated if he came into contact with people outside the pub. Thinking of this, he sighed in his heart. However, when he thought of how they had helped each other during training and how they had saved each other during the trial, his heart still felt warm. He said, "Let's go in first. From today onwards, you will follow me. What do you think?" Macon laughed. "When we came here, I heard the old man say that I didn't want to stay in that broken consortium for a long time. He didn't see us as human beings. Fortunately, you helped us get out of the sea of suffering." "Well," Zack's smile suddenly became a bit low as he nodded. Sham slightly bowed his head and didn't speak. Dean looked at the three of them. He didn't need to think to know how much they had suffered in the past few years. The scavengers' work was no different from slaves. They were sent to dangerous places, but they didn't even have the right to know about the monsters. The only thing they knew was how to pick up resources, how to transport them, how to stay outside the giant wall for a long time, and how to survive without food. Once they encountered the monsters, they would die. However, it was also because of this that the consumption of resources to cultivate scavengers was much lower than that of hunters, and the time spent was also shorter. "Hey, Mr. Dean, or Master." At this time, a light voice came. Dean's eyes lit up. "Glenn, long time no see." "It hasn't been that long. Didn't I try to assassinate you last time?" Glenn giggled. Dean smiled. "It's all in the past. Since you were willing to come today, then you are one of us." Glenn blinked her eyes and said, "I won't disturb your reunion. I'll go in first." "I'll go in too." A youth behind Glenn laughed. Dean had long noticed him. He knew that he was a senior hunter of Melon Consortium. He was a knight and a very strong existence. He was on par with Glenn, and his melee combat ability was not inferior to Sergei. "Come in. The wind is strong at the door." Dean turned back to the hall. Everyone followed in. Mason and the other two looked around in surprise. It was the first time they entered the castle of an aristocrat. They didn't expect to see such a scene. Glenn and the youth were also looking around in surprise. They didn't expect that Dean would live in such a simple castle despite his high status. Dean asked everyone to sit down. He told Gwyneth to cook, so there was no need to protect him. "Master, there is someone from the Brandon family outside the manor." At this time, Crone ran in from outside. Glenn and the youth's eyes lit up. The Brandon family had a small reputation among the upper nobles. They had almost the same status as the Milan family of the Melon Consortium. Dean smiled. "Tell them I'm not free. I won't see them." "All right, Master." Crone turned and ran away. Glenn glanced at Dean. "The Brandon family seems to be part of the Scott Consortium. Are you going to cooperate with the Scott Consortium?" Dean shook his head. It didn't take long for Crone to run back into the hall. "Master, he said that he wanted an answer about the tooth crab yesterday." "Answer?" Dean indifferently said, "Throw him out." Crone was stunned. He saw that Dean wasn't joking. He turned around and ran away. "What? You were driven out?" Cage looked at his bodyguard in shock. "He was kicked out by his butler before he even saw him? Didn't you report your name?" "I did, but his butler said he wasn't free. He didn't want to see me. Then he drove me out." The youth replied in an aggrieved tone. "Bastard." Cage slammed his palm on the table and glared angrily. "You robbed my food at my banquet. You clearly want to rob the property of my Brandon family. And now you want to expel my people? Damn you. You're just a brat who hasn't even grown hair yet. What bullshit asterisk team master? You just obtained a bit of power, and you want to go to heaven." The youth was scared. He bowed his head and didn't speak. "Prepare the car. I'm going to Chai family," Cage said in an angry voice. The young attendant felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders, and he responded before turning around and running away. Chapter 422. Are you going to start a war with the Scott Consortium? Glenn couldn't help but ask Dean after Crone went out. She suddenly realized the purpose of Dean's recruitment. She didn't expect that she would be involved in a more vicious struggle after leaving a consortium. Duddian smiled but didn't speak. He didn't deny it. It was equivalent to acquiescence. Glenn stared at him. The Melon Consortium has a very wide network of relationships. You haven't fully recovered them yet. Aren't you too anxious to deal with the Scott Consortium? Duddian smiled. I have a sense of propriety. You don't have to feel the pressure. You will be my private hunters in the future. You won't belong to the consortium, so you don't need to follow the rules and regulations of the consortium. Of course, your remuneration will be 3 times that of the Melon Consortium. At the same time, I will incorporate you into my personal knight team. You will be an aristocratic knight. Although it's only an aristocratic knight, but it is a relatively decent identity. If you can pass the assessment of the Knight's Hall, then you will be able to transfer to an official knight status. I will help you get rid of your hunter registration. Glenn was startled as she looked at the youth next to her. Glenn couldn't help but ask, help us get rid of the hunter registration? Really? Although their registration was written as civilians, but there was a special symbol behind it. This special symbol represented the hidden registration. In other words, it was the registration of hunters. The taxes paid by hunters were much higher than that of civilians. Moreover, once they committed a crime, they would be severely punished. Most importantly, the registration of hunters didn't allow them to get pregnant and have children. These policies were like shackles that clamped down on the throat of the hunters. This was the reason why the hunter profession had continued for so many years since the Vatican era. But it was difficult to form a scale. Without the right to get pregnant, it was impossible to form a direct family and family system. They could only fight alone. If they were injured, they could rely on their relationship to apply for a position as an instructor or a senior member of the consortium. Otherwise, they could only die outside the giant wall. Glenn's eyes were slightly red. She suddenly got up and bowed to Duddian. Thank you. There were no words of awe, but it was full of sincerity. Thank you, Master Dean. The young man stood up and bowed gratefully. Dean accepted both of them. In the future, you can call me the same as them. I'm in a high position now. I don't know how many people want me dead. As my personal knights, your lives will be threatened at any time. Are you willing? Yes, Glenn said without hesitation. Me too, the young man said quickly. Dean showed a satisfied smile. Sit down. The two of them sat down. Mason, Zach, and Sham were puzzled as they saw Glenn and Glenn's excited appearance. In the minds of scavengers, hunters were high and mighty. They couldn't wait to become hunters one day. They didn't expect these 2 famous senior hunters to be excited because of the removal of their hunter status. It was hard to understand. Dean turned to look at the 3. What are your plans for the future? Mason smiled. As long as you don't want me to be a scavenger, then I'll follow you. Is being a hunter not good? If that's the case, then I'll be your knight. Dean smiled. You will die at any time if you want to be my knight. If I die, I'll certainly block the knife for you. That's worth it. Mason grinned. During the trial, my life was pulled back by you several times. Without you, I would have died. Dean's eyes slightly moved. There was a bit of warmth in his heart. He didn't expect that Mason would still remember it in his heart. Me too. Zach also called out. Sham was a bit nervous as he saw both of them open their mouths. He said to Dean, I also want to, but I don't know. My legs. Dean smiled. There's no need to be a knight. I'm short a chef. If you don't mind, then you could be my chef. Last time someone tried to poison me and almost succeeded. I'll let you be my chef so that I can eat in peace. Hearing this, Mason and the other 2 were shocked. Glenn and the youth squinted their eyes. Poison you? Melon Consortium? So vicious. Macon was angry. Zach couldn't help but look at the teacup in his hand. He subconsciously put it back on the table. Sham, are you willing? Dean asked. Sham was startled. I'm willing. My family also runs a pub, but I'm not good at cooking, so I hope you don't mind. You can learn from me. I'm very picky. Dean smiled. I'll invite a chef from a big hotel to teach you. Practice well. Sham scratched his head, I know. Dean looked at the wall clock and said to Crone, Call Gabriel and Artemis to come down. Crone went upstairs. After a while, he brought Gabriel and Artemis downstairs. Introduce yourselves, Dean said. Gabriel and Artemis glanced at the crowd. Artemis was a little shy, and there was a trace of timidity in her eyes. Gabriel seemed to know his sister's timidity. He took the lead and loudly introduced himself. After the introduction, he gave his younger sister Artemis an encouraging look. Artemis followed her brother's style and introduced herself. They're orphans that I brought back from the war-torn areas outside the Golden Wall. Dean looked at the youth next to Glenn. Dennis, I will trouble you to teach Gabriel combat in the future. I have a guard who is also a senior hunter. His name is Sergei. He will be outside the giant wall for the next few days, and it will take some time for him to come back. You should assist him. Dennis got up. Yes, young master. Glenn's mouth curved into a smile. I have heard about your hunter called Sergei. He had committed a crime and was imprisoned in Thornflower Prison. I saw him fighting outside the Golden Wall. His fighting style is fierce and violent. Dennis's fighting style is more flexible. He likes to use tricks. If this child had learned from Mr. Sergei, then he should be tutoring Dennis. Don't let him go back to his old ways. It's okay. I'm still practicing the basics. Dean smiled and said to Gabriel, Let Uncle take you to practice. Gabriel nodded and stepped forward. Sir, please teach me. Dennis was satisfied as he saw that the boy wasn't shy, then lead the way. Gabriel bowed, turned around, and led him upstairs. Glenn watched them leave. Her eyes fell on Artemis. There was a trace of curiosity in her eyes. I've never seen such green hair. Where did this child come from? Probably a mixed blood from different regions. Dean casually said. He saw that Glenn was still looking at Artemis. Are you interested in teaching her your assassination skills? Glenn glanced at him. Have you had such an idea for a long time? Dean laughed. I quite like her. I'll teach her then. Glenn stood up and squatted in front of Artemis. Little girl, I'll teach you some real skills so that you can beat your brother in the future. How about it? Artemis looked at Glenn's beautiful face. I don't want to fight with my brother. Glenn was startled. There was a touch of softness in her eyes. She reached out and touched Glenn's head. She picked up Glenn's arm and looked at Dean. Can I go anywhere in the castle? Dean took a sip of tea, in addition to my study room. Understood. Glenn immediately took Artemis's hand and left. Artemis followed her step by step. She looked back at Dean from time to time. Dudian waited for the two to go far, then turned to Mason and the other two. You won't blame me for picking you up now, right? The three were startled. Macon shook his head. How can that be? Zach and Sham chuckled. Dean saw that although the two were smiling naturally, but there was a bit of mixed feelings in their eyes. He continued, You should know about my situation. I was framed by the Mellon Consortium. I had to rely on the shelter of the Ryan family to develop. I was helpless at that time. I didn't know when the Mellon Consortium would crush me. I didn't pick you up because I didn't want to implicate you. Now that the Mellon Consortium has been destroyed, I have the ability to protect myself. I don't have to worry about being inadvertently obliterated. Mason and the other two were shocked. They felt ashamed and touched. Dean, we know your intentions. Macon bowed his head. Zach and Sham nodded, but didn't speak. Dean was relieved as he saw that the three listened to his words. He didn't want to have any gap between him and his three childhood friends. During dinner, Dean received a custom-made thermal armor from a master tailor. The interior of the armor was made of delicate magic spider silk, mixed with other precious thermal materials. It was extremely warm. Even in the snowy weather, it would not be invaded by the slightest cold wind. Dean had dinner that night. He called a carriage and asked Gwyneth to be his coachman. Chapter 4:23. Dean glanced at them and quietly took a detour. Whoosh! The golden wall that was 10 feet high was easily climbed over. This golden wall was not as smooth as the surface of Sylvia's giant wall. On the surface, he could see the outline of the huge stones. With the traces of seams, he could climb over it with just a little bit of force from his fingers. Dean quietly skimmed through the night. The suburbs and towns outside the Golden Wall had long been desolate. although the war was over, but no one was willing to go back to live in the towns. Moreover, the military had strict control to prevent barbarian spies from sneaking into the crowd. Therefore, the towns were as gloomy and silent as ruins. Dean crossed the towns and went straight to a fortress in the south. As he expected, the fortress was desolate. The military didn't dare to send people to guard the fortress as long as the barbarians weren't expelled from the Red Maple Mountains. Dean ran out of the fortress and went straight to the wilderness. After a moment, Dean came to the place where Splitter was hiding. He jumped down from the cover of the weeds. He saw Splitter curled up into a ball in the tungsten steel cage. Its size didn't grow, but seemed to be a bit smaller than before. Dean was shocked as he saw the weak heat coming from its body. He trotted over to it. Splitter slowly moved its body as it heard the movement. A blood-red compound was exposed on the carapace of its body. It stared at Dean. Dean was surprised as he saw the appearance of the eyeball. The structure of its eyeball wasn't like this before. Did it mean that the eyeball had degenerated after it stopped feeding for more than 10 days? Dean put a nearly 3 meters long crocodile into the cage. He took 2 steps back and signaled Splitter to come forward to enjoy. Splitter's eyes fell on the body of the crocodile. The smell of blood from the wound stimulated the Splitter's nerves, but it didn't immediately rush over. Instead, it stared at Dean. Dean retreated 4 or 5 steps. After a few seconds, the Splitter pounced on the body of the crocodile. Its sharp limbs easily pierced through the tough cuticle of the crocodile. The Splitter tore the crocodile's body and devoured its internal organs. Dean was surprised by the lightning speed of Splitter. He found that the speed at which Splitter extended its sharp limbs was so fast that he couldn't see it clearly. Even though it was starving, Splitter's combat power was comparable to most monsters that were level 30 or so. However, what surprised him the most was the changes in the limbs of Splitter. He had seen the little Splitter that he had raised like pigs until they reached level 40 and the big Splitter. Their sharp limbs were as sharp and thin as sharp knives, but on the little Splitter's sharp blades, there were many tiny barbs. At first glance, they looked like very slight saw teeth, but when he looked closely, he found that they were tiny inverted thorns. There was no doubt that once this sharp blade that was covered in thorns pierced into the body of another demon, it would definitely cause the other party to feel excruciating pain when it was pulled out, tearing their bodies apart. However, this was both an advantage and a disadvantage. Although it could cause more wounds and bleeding when it was pulled out, the speed at which it was pulled out would be slower. If it was in a group battle, it was very likely that they would be pinned down because of the slow pull-out. However, if it was a sharp limb like the Great Splitter, stabbing and pulling out were incomparably fast. Even if it was an army of thousands of men and horses, it would still be able to charge forward and harvest at will. Dean was puzzled. How could there be such a difference between Splitter's sharp limbs and other Splitters? Was it because of the way he fed the Splitter was different? Or was it because of some unknown factors caused by hunger? Soon, Splitter ate almost all the viscera of the crocodile. Only the skin was left. It didn't continue to eat, but put the skin of the crocodile under its body. It looked at Dean with vigilance. "It's time for you to move." Dean took a deep look at the Splitter. He pulled out the wooden stakes under the chains one by one. When a second chain was loosened, Splitter pushed the cage. The cage rolled over and rushed towards Dean. Dean dodged and moved to the other side of the chain and pulled it out. Bang! Splitter moved the cage towards Dean. Under Splitter's struggle, the last chain was pulled out from the ground and dragged on the ground. Dean grabbed the chain in his hand and jumped to the basement. He struggled to pull out the cage. The cage had just moved to the door when Splitter rushed towards Dean. Its body collided with the cage and the door. Bang! The door, which was made of concrete, suddenly broke. Dean pulled the chain and pulled the cage to run in the wilderness. Splitter squeaked in the cage as if he was very angry. Dean's arms were sore after running for more than 10 miles. He had to sit down to rest. Splitter struggled fiercely in the cage, banging against the cage with a loud noise. Dean shook his head. "I shouldn't have fed you first. Now you have the strength to toss around, right?" Splitter stopped, struggling as it stared at Dean with its bloody, compound eyes. Dean looked at the Splitter as he rested. In the silence, Splitter pounced on the cage. The sharp blade stretched out from the edge of the cage and stabbed towards Dean. But the distance was too short. Dean smiled as he got up and patted the dust off his buttocks. A few hours later, Dean finally dragged the splitter to a fortress where the Holy Church was stationed. The night was deep, and there was a fire tower on the fortress. Dudian crouched in the grass and looked around. He noticed that there was a hidden red heat in the grass nearby. It was the hidden sentries of the stronghold. Their camouflage was excellent. Their bodies exuded the smell of green grass. Unless one had an extremely sensitive sense of smell, even a senior hunter wouldn't be able to smell them. Dean jumped over the sentries hidden in the grass and finally found a relatively spacious gap where no sentries were stationed. There was a smile on his face as he pulled the splitter and quietly ran over. The splitter screamed from time to time along the way, but gradually got tired. It sat in the cage and allowed Dean to drag it. Squeak! Splitter called out in vain as Dean passed through the gap in the grass. Whoosh! Dudien's soles suddenly exerted force as he quickly ran. Clang! The messy chains at the back touched the cage and clanked. Dean didn't know if the sentries who were thousands of meters away could hear him, but he didn't care too much as he ran at full speed. After running for a few miles, Dean heard a lot of footsteps coming from behind. He knew that the people stationed in the stronghold were alarmed. He couldn't help but sigh. He came to the front of the cage and whipped the chains. The splitter retreated slightly as it saw Dean's momentum. Dudian quickly took out the key and opened the lock of the cage. He looked at the direction of the sound and judged the distance between the two sides. After a few seconds, he opened the door of the cage and ran away. Squeak! The splitter was stunned as it looked at the door that was opened. It paused for half a second before it reacted. It screamed and rushed out. Clang! At the same time it rushed out of the cage. It waved its sharp blade to vent its anger and overturn the cage. Stop! Who is it? Stop! This is the luminous church. Stop right now and surrender. Chapter 424. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, several arrows were shot and nailed into the weeds beside Splitter. The blood-colored compound eye on Splitter's carapace moved slightly, and the dot in the center of the compound eye moved backward. Its body, which was as ferocious as a devil, slowly turned around and pounced forward like a fierce tiger. Its sharp limbs pushed its body forward like a spider. Like a fluffy seaweed, Splitter was caught up in the pursuing team. What is this? Ah, monster! It's a monster! All of a sudden, blood-curdling screams resounded. Countless flesh and bones were cut and torn apart. Splitter rushed into the group of Knights of Light. Its seaweed-like body was like a meat grinder. Its sharp blade easily pierced through the chest armor of the Knights of Light. Its movement was swift and violent. The blood-red compound eyes on the carapace moved slightly as it easily dodged the attacks coming from all directions. Dean ran for hundreds of meters and looked back to see the one-sided massacre. He frowned and sighed. He took out his dagger and quietly returned to the front of the cage to watch the battle. Don't panic. Open the shield formation. A young knight riding on a white horse shouted angrily. His handsome face was filled with fear as he anxiously shouted at the defeated troops in front of him. However, under the fast attack of Splitter, these well-trained Knights of Light were already scared out of their wits. How could they care about his shouts? They turned around and ran away. The young knight was anxious and angry. He gritted his teeth, grabbed his bow, knocked an arrow, and shot. Whoosh! The arrow hit the sharp blade of Splitter and bounced off. The sudden attack attracted little Splitter's attention. The blood-red compound eyes on its carapace slightly rotated and locked on the young knight in the crowd. Suddenly, it pounced towards the young knight. Along the way, it brandished its sharp blade and chopped off the bodies of the knights who couldn't dodge in time. It was as easy as cutting tofu. Along the way, there were many bodies that were cut in half in miserable shrieks. It was like an Azura hell. The young knight, who had never seen such a ferocious monster, turned pale with fright and clutched the reins of his horse. Seeing the little Splitter coming straight at him, he gave a loud cry, pulled the reins, and turned his horse to run away. Da-da-da. The well-trained warhorse ran away in panic. Splitter chased after it. The distance between the two was getting shorter and shorter. In the blink of an eye, Splitter had caught up with it. It squeaked angrily and thrust its sharp blade-like limbs into the horse's tail. Splitter's tail was pierced into the horse's body. The healthy horse neighed in pain, raising its front hooves high in the air as it cried out miserably. Splitter quickly pulled out its sharp blade and completely tore the wound open. Intestines and blood flowed out. The warhorse was too injured. It fell down with a painful neigh. Splitter ignored the warhorse and pounced on the young knight on the ground. The young knight looked at the ferocious and huge body. He was so scared that his hair stood on end. He regretted it. He never thought that it would be such a ferocious monster that smuggled over. If he had known, he wouldn't have chased after them, even if he was beaten to death. Whoosh! In desperation, he waved his sword to resist, but only managed to parry the two sharp blades of Splitter. The other blades on Splitter's back pierced through the young knight's shoulders, head, neck, thighs, and other parts of his body like seaweed. He died instantly. He didn't even have time to let out a scream. Splitter roared and pounced on the young knight's body. It roared and gnawed on the young knight's body. The surrounding knights of light fled in fear as they saw the scene. In the blink of an eye, there were only a few knights whose bodies had been chopped off. They were wailing in pain and rolling on the ground. Some of them had been chopped off from the abdomen. They clenched their teeth in pain and used their hands to crawl on the ground to hide in the bushes. Dean shook his head as he saw that the battle was over. He glanced at the battlefield and bent down to pick up a few stones from the ground. He aimed at the seriously injured figures who were trying to sneak into the grass to hide. He threw the stones at them. Puff, puff, puff. The stone flew out and pierced through the head of a knight who had just crawled into the grass. The knight's helmet was dented, and he didn't make any sound. Several survivors were killed by Dean. Splitter heard the movement and turned its head to look at Dean. It roared in anger. It abandoned the young knight, who was bitten on the face and chest, and rushed towards Dean. Dean pulled the chain of the cage and continued to run. There was no Splitter in the cage, so it didn't take much effort to pull the chain. Nevertheless, the distance between him and Splitter was getting closer. Dean stopped after running for 700 or 800 meters. He saw Splitter chasing after him. His mouth curved into a smile. He grabbed the iron frame of the cage as he looked at Splitter. The latter was like a train that was rushing at full speed. Dean clenched his fingers. He turned around and rotated the cage as the Splitter rushed towards him. The twisting force caused by his feet and waist pulled the cage horizontally. He swung the cage 180 degrees and hit the Splitter. Bang! The opening of the cage was aimed at the Splitter. The Splitter's body crashed into the cage. At the moment of impact, Dean swung the inertia of the cage, and his body was deflected. He rolled on the ground 7 or 8 times before coming to a stop. While rolling, Dean pressed the door of the cage and fastened the lock. When the cage stopped rolling, Dean stepped on the tungsten steel column and jumped back, stepping on the tungsten steel chain on the ground. Squeak! The little Splitter got up again when it finished rolling. Seeing that it was locked in this damn cage again, it couldn't help but let out an extremely loud and angry roar. Dean bent down to pick up the tungsten steel chain from the ground. He dragged the cage and continued to walk. The little Splitter fiercely struggled in the cage and screamed in anger. Dean didn't care as he dragged the little Splitter and ran through the grass. 10 minutes later, Dean once again saw the towering giant wall. He saw a little fire in front of the giant wall. He quietly approached it and saw that it was the entrance to the giant wall. There was a team of Knights of Light standing guard outside the entrance. Scott Consortium, it's you. Dean narrowed his eyes. The entrance to the giant wall wasn't the one he rented, but the one belonging to the Scott Consortium. It was the only entrance that he could safely transport Splitter to the area outside the giant wall. Whoosh! Dean dropped the chain and took the dagger. He pulled out a piece of black cloth and covered his face. Dean rushed over after getting close to a certain distance. Who is it? Stop! There's an enemy attack. Send a message. The Knights of Light who were guarding the entrance were scared as they saw the masked figure jump out. But their reaction wasn't slow. They quickly formed a circle and stared at Dean with their swords and shields. Dean quickly rushed over. When he was about 7 or 8 meters away, he suddenly threw the dagger. The dagger pierced through the forehead of a knight. The latter didn't have time to react. He didn't have time to move the shield to his head, so he suddenly fell down. Kill! Several knights roared and rushed over. Dean raised his hand and grabbed a spear that was stabbing towards him. His body rotated and his arms exerted strength. He lifted the spear and swept it towards the surrounding people. The knight was shocked, as he didn't expect the strength of the enemy to be so fierce. He let go of the spear. At the same time, Dean grabbed the spear and swept it like a dragon. The spear instantly pierced the throat of a knight and hit the shield of another knight. The heavy force pressed on the shield, and the knight fell to the ground. He knelt in front of Dean. Dean pushed the spear with his arm and quickly rushed out. The spear swung away the attacks from the surrounding people. He flew up and kicked the man's shield. Bang! The man's body flew out and fainted on the ground. Dean waved the spear and quickly killed. In the blink of an eye, the 8 knights on duty fell down. There was a huge difference in physique between the two sides. They didn't have the strength to fight back. Dean came to the knight who was stabbed by the dagger. He pulled out the dagger from the forehead of the knight and put it into the scabbard on his leg. He didn't throw away the spear in his hand. He turned back to the cage, pulled the chain, and dragged the cage to the front of the passage. He used the tip of the spear to open the heavy iron gate on the ground. He dragged the cage to the other side of the passage and climbed out. As soon as he came out, Dean heard a surprised voice. He couldn't help but frown. He turned around and saw 3 figures sitting around a campfire. They were warming themselves. At the moment, all of them were looking at him. They seemed to be surprised by the sudden opening of the passage. Lord Hunter. One of the stronger teenagers saw Dean's dress and was startled for a moment. There was a trace of excitement in his eyes. He immediately got up and trotted over. He respectfully said, "Greetings, Mr. Hunter. I'm Lorien, scavenger of Consortium." Chapter 425. Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter. At this time, the other 2 people who were sitting near the campfire also ran over. They were a charming girl and a middle-aged man. They saw Dudian dressed in black armor and bowed their heads respectfully. Dudian didn't pay attention to them, but stared at the sturdy boy. There was a trace of thinking in his eyes. Suddenly, he thought of a person and couldn't help but be startled. His mood was a bit complicated. Lorien, this name was often heard when he was in the scavenger special training. Lorien was one of the members who trained with him. Lorien's performance was second only to him. Lorien was not convinced of him and often compared with him. He vaguely remembered that among all the students, Lorien was the first to be selected by a consortium. And the consortium that selected him was the Scott Consortium. He didn't expect that a few years would pass in the blink of an eye. Unexpectedly, he would unexpectedly meet an acquaintance here. "Mr. Hunter, are you out to perform a task?" Lorien saw that Duddy and kept looking at him. He was a bit nervous and cramped, but he still asked in a flattering tone. His voice had just fallen when the sound of metal colliding echoed in the passage. Dean took back his thoughts. He saw the surprised look on the faces of several people. He sighed in his heart. His fingers hooked the dagger in the scabbard on his thigh and quickly cut it. Blood appeared on Lorien's throat. Dudian's sudden move shocked the 3 people. Lorien felt the pain in his throat and immediately covered his neck. He felt warm blood overflow from the wound. His heart couldn't help but panic. He pressed the wound and slowly retreated. He looked at Dudian in front of him in fear. "Sorry, you can only blame your bad luck." Dean sighed and slowly said. Lorien's eyes widened as he slowly fell down and lost his breath. The girl and the middle-aged man next to him were scared and stunned on the spot. Puff! Puff! Dean didn't wait for the 2 to speak. The dagger quickly stabbed out, and a bloody hole appeared on their throats. They stared in horror and fell down. Dean put the dagger into the scabbard and pulled out Splitter from the chain. He looked at the 3 bodies on the ground. His mood was a bit complicated. In the past, he had killed strangers, so he didn't have too deep feelings. But tonight, he had killed an acquaintance from his childhood. although the latter often compared himself with him, but he didn't do anything too bad. But now he had died in his hands. Creak! Splitter smelled the blood and struggled in the cage. Dean retracted his gaze and dragged it along the giant wall. The dark night was silent. The sound of insects could be faintly heard in the weeds. Roars could be heard in the distance. The sounds were hoarse and trembling, making strange sounds that made one's scalp go numb. Dean dragged the chain step by step. Slowly, as he walked for a long time, his mind gradually recovered from Lorien's death. From time to time, he would check the surrounding terrain to identify the direction. If you want to go to the Splitter's cave from outside the Scott Giant Wall, you will need to bypass the third area. The monsters in the third area of the Scott Consortium are generally level 15 to 23. You will need a senior hunter to ensure your safety. Dean's eyes lit up as he dragged the chain along area number 3. Soon he came to a ruin. The asphalt road on the ground had long been cracked and covered with weeds. There were ruins on both sides of the asphalt road. They were as quiet as skeletons in the night. Pythons and lizards crawled from time to time. Clang! Clang! The cage rolled on the ground, making a loud noise. Whoosh! A giant cat-like monster came from the dark. It jumped on a moss-covered, car-shaped object. The top of the object cracked. The monster lightly jumped out and landed on the ground. It stared at Dean. Dean recognized that it was a difficult monster called Copperclaw Cat. It was a level 19 monster. It was very flexible. It could annihilate an intermediate hunter team if it was caught off guard. The little Splitter in the cage seemed to feel the hostility. It suddenly stood up and roared in a low voice. The Copperclaw Cat retracted its claws when it heard the roar. It hesitated for a moment, but suddenly turned around and jumped into the nearby ruins. It disappeared into the night. Dean was surprised. He didn't expect that these bloodthirsty and ferocious monsters would know fear. Squeak, squeak. Splitter scared the copper-clawed cat away, but it still roared in the direction it had gone. It's quite awe-inspiring. Dean chuckled as he pulled the chain and continued to move forward. Splitter turned its head and roared at Dean. Dean continued to move forward as if he hadn't heard the roar. Splitter screamed a few times. It was full of anger as it saw that Dean ignored it. Splitter's voice stopped after a few minutes as it saw that Dean didn't pay attention to it. From time to time, it would hit the cage and vent its dissatisfaction. More than 2 hours later, Dean crossed the entire area number 3 and arrived at his own territory. He encountered a lot of monsters along the way. Some were scared away by the roar of Splitter, while others were killed by Dean. It was easy for him to kill monsters below level 25 with his current combat power. Dean came to the cave of Splitter after another hour. "I'm taking you home." Dean looked at the little Splitter in the cage and said. Splitter roared at Dean as it heard his voice. Dean clapped his hands as he looked at the entrance of the cave. He was relieved, although there were layers of boulders, but he could still see the amazing heat coming out of the boulders. It was obvious that Splitter was still alive. He looked at it for a while, then turned away. It didn't take long for Dean to come to the entrance of the giant wall. He saw a huge cage standing near the entrance. It was the big cage that he had asked Sergei to transport. The size of the cage was bigger than the entrance of the passage. It was made of loose materials, but the connection was firm. It wasn't worse than a directly welded cage. Dean was relieved to see that the cage was still there. He grabbed the cage and put it on his back. He went back to Splitter's cave and put down the cage. He picked up a few boulders and wrapped them around the chain. He looked at Splitter. "Be obedient, and I'll change your place." Squeak! Splitter roared in anger. Dean smiled and turned to the entrance of the cave. He lifted the boulder and saw that Splitter was still lying inside the cave. It had been half a month, but its body had become extremely sturdy. Its length was about 6 or 7 meters. It was twice the size of Splitter in the small cage. The cave was filled with a pungent stench and rotten smell. Dean held his breath as he jumped into the cave. He grabbed Splitter's body and dragged it out. The Splitter's wound had been smeared with lime by Dean, but it didn't regenerate its limbs. At the moment, only a bare body was left. It looked like a moth with its wings torn off. The carapace on its body was soft. The color of the carapace was white. It seemed that it was affected by the moisture on the ground and had developed deformities. Splitter opened its mouth to bite Dean as it saw Dean approach. Dean easily subdued it and carried it to the big cage outside the cave. Bang! Bang! Splitter kept struggling as it hit the tungsten steel pillar of the big cage. Dean looked at Splitter. "It's your turn." It was the first time for Splitter to see its companion. It was quiet as it heard Dean's voice. It was as if it was awakened and angrily shouted again. Dean didn't pay attention to its roar. He used the spear to force it to the other side of the small cage. He moved the small cage to the front of the big cage. The door was facing the big cage. He pulled the bolt of the cage and quickly turned to hide. He waved the spear and pierced the cage. Splitter was forced to dodge. It smashed open the door of the cage and rolled into the big cage. Dean kicked open the door of the small cage and grabbed the door of the big cage to close it. Splitter screamed as it saw the exposed door. It wanted to rush out of the big cage, but it was too late. The door was half closed. Dean used his spear to pin it down. At the same time, he used all his strength to push and bolt the door. He used one hand to resist the sharp blade of Splitter, while the other hand put the bolt on the big lock. Dean sat down. He was sweating profusely. Bang! Splitter slammed the door of the big cage violently, but the door of the big cage was heavy, and there was a huge Splitter lying inside. Its slamming only made the cage shake slightly, but it didn't have any effect on it. Whether or not you can survive in the future will depend on your own luck. Dean looked at the struggling Splitter and said. He didn't care whether Splitter could understand or not. He spent a lot of effort to move the Splitter because he knew that there would be few opportunities for him to hunt outside the giant wall in the future. He planned to enter the inner wall to peep at the pinnacle of the world after the lecture. He wanted to unravel the many mysteries in his heart. He also wanted to find a way to deal with the military and the Holy Church. The foundation of these two forces was in the inner wall. Even if he destroyed the military and the Holy Church in the outer wall, it was difficult to guarantee that the inner wall wouldn't send forces to suppress him. The cruel isolation of the high wall made him know that there was a sky beyond the sky. Therefore, if he wanted to climb to the sky, he would have to break the sky beyond the sky. Otherwise, all the glory would turn to dust. The cave of Splitter was located in the middle of his domain. If he wanted to raise Splitter, he would have to ask Sergei to take care of it or let it find its own food. Chapter 426. Dean was near the cave. He relied on thermal vision to capture some monsters that came out to forage at night. He slaughtered them and brought them back to the cage. He threw 2 sickle zombies into the cage. The sickle zombies were large enough to fit directly into the cage. Their heads weren't chopped off. Dean threw them into the cage. They roared and rushed towards the Splitter. The little Splitter was frightened at first, but soon it was angry as if its dignity was insulted. It rushed forward, and the 2 sickle zombies were quickly chopped into pieces by its sharp limbs. Dean looked at them and threw the lower bodies of the 2 sickle zombies a few meters away from the cage. Then he killed the other prey and placed them more than 10 meters away from the cage. Dean clapped his hands and looked at Splitter, who was roaring in the cage. He didn't stay any longer and left. The sky was beginning to dawn. Dean moved forward at full speed. He met some monsters along the way, but he was too lazy to pay attention to them. The monsters chased him crazily, but they couldn't catch up with Dean after chasing for more than 10 miles. They slowly abandoned their prey. In front of the giant wall, Dean took off his armor. The sticky, transparent wings on his back gently stretched out and slightly trembled. He felt his body slowly float up. Immediately, his feet stepped on the giant wall. With the help of the wings, he ran up the giant wall. The more he ran, the faster he ran, faster than on the ground. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Dean ran to the giant wall. He felt that his chest was frozen. He folded his wings and quickly put on his armor. His body shivered slightly, but soon it was warm again. He continued to run along the giant wall. Half an hour later, he came to a corner. He continued to run along the corner. According to the map, the giant wall of Sylvia was square like the ancient city walls of the Celestial Empire, except that there were no watchtowers or signal towers. Dean suddenly came up with an idea. It seemed that he could sneak into the inner wall directly from the top of the giant wall. This idea made him excited, but he calmed down after thinking about it. He knew nothing about the inner wall. Even if he could sneak into the inner wall, it would be meaningless. Moreover, there were people like the dragon girl in the inner wall. If he was careless and provoked someone, then his identity would be exposed. The gains wouldn't make up for the losses. He gradually saw a vast and magnificent building. He was shocked as he looked down from the top of the giant wall. He had a bird's-eye view of the entire landscape from the top of the giant wall. The stronghold that they had just passed was like a black dragon that stretched into the distance. Behind the stronghold was a vast suburb filled with desolate villages. At this moment, in some of the villages, they could see some dark-skinned barbarians walking around, holding crude weapons. Clearly, they were the low-ranking barbarian soldiers. Behind these suburbs was the Golden Wall. At this moment, the sky was dimly lit, and there were already countless ant-like black dots moving about on the Golden Wall. They were all the wall builders. There were neatly arranged buildings behind the Golden Wall. It was the southernmost scenery of the commercial district. Dean looked up to the front. There were densely packed buildings extending into the distance. At the end of the buildings, there was a giant wall in the hazy mist. It was the high wall of the inner wall area. It had a history of more than 200 years. Its height was more than half of the giant wall of Sylvia. It was said that countless wall builders had died during the construction of the inner wall. The project was extremely huge. Dean's heart was moved. He didn't want to sneak in for the time being. He just wanted to peep at the scenery of the inner wall from the giant wall of Sylvia. Wouldn't it be good? He didn't want to enter the inner wall in the future. Thinking of this, he made up his mind and immediately continued to run forward. More than an hour later, the huge gray outline in Dean's eyes finally became clear. He crossed the entire width of the outer wall and came to the inner wall. He had been running at full speed for more than an hour. With the help of the wings, his speed was 5 times faster than the fastest horse. He was so tired that his whole body was drenched in sweat. The soft layer of the armor was soaked. Fortunately, the soft layer had the effect of absorbing sweat, so he didn't get wet. Who? Dean gasped for breath as he leaned on the giant wall to rest. He looked at the wall of the inner wall. The wall was extremely tall. It cut off the entire outer wall from north to south. It was like a huge gate. The width of the inner wall was about 40 to 50 meters. It was 3 times wider than the most prosperous street in the commercial district. The ground was shrouded in the shadow of light behind the high wall. It was a vast forest overgrown with weeds. In the distance, there were lakes, sandy lands, and tall mountains. But as far as the eye could see, there was no sign of a village within a dozen miles. It was extremely spacious. Dean was startled as he looked at it. In his impression, the inner wall should be an extremely prosperous and lively place. The scenery was beautiful. The top people of the giant wall lived there. Even the aristocrats like the Mel family were expelled from the inner wall. It could be seen that the people in the inner wall were the elites of the elites. However, this desolate scene subverted his worldview. Dean suppressed the doubts in his heart and continued to run forward. The closer he got, the clearer it became. Dean ran to the opposite line of the inner wall. He looked at the straight wall. The golden wall was more than 30 meters high. It was like a small threshold. It was not even a threshold. It could only be regarded as a small wrinkle. Behind the high wall was a vast plain. The plain stretched very far. There were mountains at the end. There seemed to be snow on the top of the mountain. There were lakes in the plain, but there were no villages or towns. Dean found it inconceivable that such a large area was empty. Even the most dilapidated slums in the outer wall wouldn't have such a large area that was empty. He suddenly thought of the shape on the map. The shock in his eyes slowly calmed down. The soil of the entire giant wall was occupied by the inner wall. Nearly 80% of the soil was in the inner wall. But the outer wall and the radiation area only accounted for 20%. This vast plain was a rare territory in the outer wall. But in the inner wall, perhaps it was a relatively unvisited wasteland. Dean decided to move forward. After walking for a while, Dean suddenly saw a huge shadow galloping in the grassland at the end of the plain. Behind the shadow, there was a very small sesame-like black grain chasing after it. Dean suddenly saw that the shadow in front of him was actually a huge monster that was more than 10 meters long. Its body was like a centipede with countless side feet, and its tail was high up like a scorpion with barbs. The person chasing the centipede monster turned out to be a very young boy, about 16 or 17 years old, almost the same age as Dean. His face still had the childish look of a teenager, holding a huge sword in his hand, chasing the centipede monster at full speed. Centipede? Dean was surprised. This was a level 22 monster. Moreover, it was a highly toxic monster. It was extremely difficult to deal with. Even an intermediate hunter would die if they encountered it. Even senior hunters wouldn't be willing to hunt this thing. If they were careless and got poisoned, most of the antidote would be difficult to save. Whoosh! All of a sudden, the youth chasing after it threw out a chain, clamping down on the barbs at the end of the 100-legged devil centipede's tail, pulling it back. The centipede struggled and swung its tail. It turned around and rushed towards the boy. The boy was holding a huge knife that was half the height of his body. He jumped up and stepped on the centipede's body. He cut a huge wound on the centipede's body. One man and one beast fought together. After a moment, the boy threw the huge knife and the centipede's head was cut off. The centipede suddenly stopped struggling. Its body slightly twisted. Dean was shocked. He didn't think that the people of the inner wall would be so strong. It was the first time that he saw someone of the same age as him. The boy pulled out the huge knife and tied the chain to the centipede's tail. He dragged the centipede away. Dean immediately followed the boy. He wanted to peep at the place where the boy lived. Suddenly, the boy stopped and looked back at the sky. Dean was shocked when he saw him turn his head. He quickly shrank his body and hid under the edge of the giant wall. After a moment, he pulled out the dagger and wiped it clean. He raised it slightly and looked at the boy with the help of the reflection from the side of the dagger. Although the image of the metal object was blurred, especially from a distance of a kilometer, he could see the boy standing quietly on the ground without any movement. Chapter 427. Dean was relieved as he saw the youth turn around and continue to drag the centipede. He didn't expect the youth's senses to be so sensitive. He didn't know what would happen if the youth saw him. He also didn't know what kind of status the youth had in the inner wall. What level of strength did the dragon girl belong to in the inner wall? What surprised him the most was that there were monsters in the inner wall. Wasn't it similar to the outer wall? How could the monsters come to the inner wall? Wasn't it easy to annihilate the monsters in the inner wall with the strength of the dragon girl? He couldn't think of a reason, but he was glad that he hadn't rashly gone against the light church and military. Otherwise, if he had forced these two forces into a corner, who knew what kind of trouble it would have brought? As the saying goes, if you want to deal with the Holy Church and the military, then you have to find a way to control their strength in the inner wall. There were some doubts in his heart as he thought of this. The last barbarian attack had put the commercial district in danger. The military should have asked for reinforcements from the inner wall, but there was no response from the inner wall. Did the inner wall not care about the life and death of the outer wall? Or did the military not ask for reinforcement from the inner wall? Do they have other cards up their sleeves? However, there was another possibility. It was that the barbarians did something so that the inner wall didn't send reinforcements. But it meant that the barbarians could contact the inner wall. There was a big background behind them. However, the barbarians lived in the radiation zone and the inner wall. There was an outer wall area between them. It was difficult to get in touch with the people in the inner wall. Perhaps it was the barbarians from the inner wall that colluded with the barbarians. But there were more problems. Dean frowned. He felt that the problem was a bit complicated and thorny. He thought of a person that he had missed, Yvette, who was imprisoned in the military. Dean looked up at the boy who was far away. He thought about it and put away the idea of continuing to follow him. At the moment, the sun had risen and it was not early. He should go back. Moreover, with his current ability, it was not difficult to climb the giant wall. In the future, there would be opportunities to come back and see. Gwyneth was waiting at the station. She leaned on the carriage and covered her face with a straw hat. Dudian hadn't returned after one night. She was puzzled. Although she had become Dudian's maid, she still felt that it was difficult to understand the boy. The latter always seemed to hide something from her, so she couldn't understand his real cards. Suddenly, a smell drifted over. Gwyneth lifted the straw hat and looked at Dudian. She put on the straw hat and indifferently said, "Are we going back now? There's no hurry. Let's eat something first." Dean peeled off the tarpaulin in his hand. There were several pieces of bread inside. He took out one and put it in his mouth. He handed the rest to Gwyneth. "Eat." Gwyneth was startled. She took one of them and said, "I can't eat so much." "You don't need to lose weight. You're already beautiful." Dean casually said a famous phrase and smiled. He handed the tarp to her and turned around to get into the carriage. Gwyneth was startled as she heard Dean's words. She silently put away the pieces of bread and shook the rope. The horse was startled and immediately neighed and ran away. As soon as he came to the front of the castle, Dean saw that the gate was surrounded by reporters from various newspapers. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. Suddenly, he thought of something. There were 3 days left before his lecture. It was estimated that the aristocratic circle of the entire commercial district was paying attention to every move here. Many people with better eyesight noticed the carriage. They withdrew from the gate like a swarm of ants. They moved towards the carriage. Gwyneth's expression was indifferent. She didn't have the slightest intention to slow down. She shook the rope, and the carriage rushed forward at a faster speed. The people who came to encircle Dean were scared and hurriedly moved to the side. Although the interview was profitable, but their lives were the most important. Moreover, if they were injured or killed by Dean's hooves, they wouldn't be able to receive compensation for their injuries. Not to mention that the genius master would use his life to compensate for their injuries. Noyce, who was guarding the gate, saw the carriage and opened the gate. The carriage rushed into the manor and stopped in front of the castle. Dean got off the carriage and shook his head as he heard the shouts from outside the manor. He entered the castle. "Master, you're back." Crone greeted him. Dennis and Glenn were sitting in the hall. They were enjoying breakfast. They got up and greeted Dean when they saw him. He went upstairs to change his clothes. He put on a soft and warm sweater and went back downstairs. He looked at Glenn, who had finished breakfast. "Go to the military and help me bring back a person. Her name is Yvette. She is the barbarian royal family member that I have arrested. The military has promised to hand her over to me after the interrogation. This is my medal." He handed his knight medal to her. Glenn was surprised. She didn't think that Dean's power was so big that he could get the barbarian royal family from the military. But she was relieved as she thought about the fact that Dean had donated the legendary item for free. She nodded. "I'll go now." Dean nodded and sat at the table. He called Crone to serve the meal. After 10 minutes, a sumptuous breakfast was served on the table. Dennis was speechless when he saw the ingredients of the breakfast. He didn't think that Dean would eat so extravagantly, even though he lived in such a simple house. Dean felt a lot warmer after breakfast. The biting cold feeling was dispelled. He went back to the study room to study the medical knowledge and exercise the flexibility of his left hand. He suddenly thought of the teenager he saw in the morning. He called Crone. "Go and send a message to the old man. Tell him to buy parasitic soul worms from the temple or the black market. The more precious, the better." Dudian commanded. Now that he had power and wealth, he didn't need to personally go outside the giant wall to hunt. He only needed to spend money to buy them. Not only could he pick the type of parasitic soul worm that he liked, but the efficiency was also high. Outside the giant wall, to encounter a named monster, all depended on luck. Sometimes he would squat for a few months, and he might not be able to find one. As for rare monsters, the probability was even lower. "Yes, young master." Crone thought for a while and was ready to leave. "Wait." Dean stopped him. "By the way, tell the old man to spread the news that I need parasitic soul worms. If other nobles are willing to provide rare parasitic soul worms, then they will have the opportunity to get a place as my student. If they provide rare parasitic soul worms, then they will get a place as a student, and I will cultivate them wholeheartedly." Crone was startled for a moment. His eyes flickered as he replied, "I know. Afternoon. Dennis came back with a tall woman with wheat-colored skin. There was a big difference between the women in the giant wall. The barbarians in the radiation zone were generally tall and burly. Even the women were no exception. Yvette's height was the same as most regular knights. She was about 1.75 meters. Compared with the women in the giant wall, she was almost a crane in a flock of chickens. Even most of the men in the giant wall didn't have such a height. In addition to the figure, the skin color was also very different. Even the women in the slums who didn't bathe all year round didn't have such a skin color. Although the body was dirty, but at least the face could be seen. Yvette obviously had a problem with her skin color. Chapter 428. Master, the person you want has been brought back. Dennis said. Dean nodded and turned to go upstairs, sent her to my study room. Yes, Master. Dennis nodded. Dean came to the study room not long after. Dennis sent Yvette up. Master, is there anything else you want me to do? You go back first. Tell the others to leave too. Don't come close or disturb me. Dean sat on the sofa as he poured tea. Dennis nodded and gently closed the door. Only Dean and Yvette were left in the study room. Dean poured 2 cups of tea and glanced at Yvette. He saw her numb expression and dull eyes. She didn't say a word. She just stood there in a daze. He smiled and said in English, Don't pretend. Come and sit down. Yvette's expression was wooden. She didn't respond. Dean raised his eyebrows. He raised his hand and waved it in front of her. He was about to open his mouth when Yvette suddenly reached out her hand towards Dean's throat. Dean's eyes lit up. He leaned back and hit her shoulder. Her body was pushed back and hit the door. Dust fell off the door frame. Yvette didn't hit him. She waved her hands and rushed towards Dean. Her fingers were like claws. Dean waved his arm and blocked one of her hands. He leaned sideways and cut into her chest. His shoulder hit her and pushed her back again. Dean didn't wait for her to stand firm. Dean's palm swept past her cheek and grabbed her throat. He tightened his grip. Do you want to die? Yvette's raised arm stopped. Her eyes were full of resentment as she stared at Dean. You want to sneak attack me? Even if you kill me, you will die. Dean's expression was cold. Moreover, you won't be able to kill me with your strength. Yvette bit her lips. Blood seeped out. She didn't notice it. She was still staring at Dean with resentment. She was like a beast that wanted to devour people. Hate me? Dean's face was cold. He didn't have the slightest sympathy. I don't care what you think in your heart. You have to follow my rules unless you want to suffer 10 times more pain and humiliation. As he spoke, he slowly released his fingers. His gaze was as cold as a sword as he looked at Yvette's eyes that were filled with resentment. Yvette bit her lower lip as she heard Dean's words. She stared at Dean. Her eyes were full of hatred, resentment, anger, and faintly there was a trace of fear. Dean turned back to the sofa and sat down. He pointed to the opposite side and said, Come and sit. Yvette clenched her teeth. Her hands trembled as if she was trying to restrain and endure. She slowly sat on the sofa opposite to Dean and stared at him. What? Are you mute? Or did they cut off your tongue? Dean picked up the teacup and handed it to her. Yvette's chest violently rose and fell. Her fingers were slightly clenched. Her eyes seemed to pop out of their sockets as she stared straight at Dean. Dean leaned back on the sofa and sneered. You haven't learned anything else, but you have learned how to pretend to be mute. If you have the strength to hate me, then you might as well beg me. Maybe I can help you get revenge by killing the people who whipped you and humiliated you. When Yvette heard the word rape, her body slightly trembled. A trace of fear flashed through her angry and resentful eyes. Her face also paled a little. She slowly lowered her head. No one could see her expression. After a moment, her voice was hoarse and full of resentment as she said word by word, All of this is because of you. Dean indifferently said, If you know how to blame yourself for your stupidity, then at least you can make some progress in the future. If you continue to blame others, then you will only become a resentful woman. You should have known your fate when I captured you. You didn't have the courage to commit suicide. I saved your life. In the end, you shouldn't hate me, but thank me. Yvette looked up with red eyes. If you didn't say that you would save my life, then I would have already committed suicide. I wouldn't have been humiliated by you. Dean indifferently said, You can't take revenge by committing suicide. Yvette bitterly looked at him. What do you want? Can you help me? Will you help me? Whether I will help or not depends on your attitude. Dean picked up the tea and drank. At least I can't see that you are begging me. Yvette almost spat out a mouthful of blood. She was so angry that she lowered her head and gritted her teeth. You saved my life because you want to get some secrets from me. Even if I know, I won't tell you. Duddian slowly said, Look at me first. Yvette was startled as she looked at Dean. Her eyes were still full of hatred. Dean raised a finger. First, as a member of the Giant Wall, I have to capture you since you have invaded our territory. This is my duty. Secondly, I promised to keep your life after I sent you to the military. Now that you're still alive, I've done what I said I would do. Third, there is no mouth in this world that I can't pry open. I can apply the military's means to you 100 times more. Dean suddenly smiled. In addition, I want to remind you that even if you commit suicide, it will still be valuable for me. I can dissect your body and peel off your skin to see if your bones are the same as those of the people inside the Giant Wall. I can transport your flesh and blood to your tribe so that they can taste it. Oh, and your head. Your facial features are so delicate. I can empty your brain and make it my chamber pot. Yvette looked at the teenager's smiling expression. She couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. Are you threatening me? Dean shook his head. Why would I threaten you? I'm just telling you a fact. Even if you die, I believe that your tribe won't want to see your body being ruined by us. I can still get what I need. It's just a bit troublesome. I like efficiency. I hate any inefficient methods, so I don't want to do things that I hate. Do you understand? Yvette was so angry that her chest violently heaved up and down. She gritted her teeth and said, As long as you help me get revenge, I will tell you everything I know. But you have to help me kill those damn dwarf pigs first. It's better to save time. Why do you want to waste so much time? Dean smiled. The people who whipped you and raped you won't be able to run away. I'll solemnly introduce myself to you. My name is Dean. I have two main occupations. The first one is a master of the Temple of Elements. The second one is a golden knight of the Knight's Hall. So you can fully believe that your request is very simple for me. Yvette was startled. She was a member of the royal barbarian family who regarded the outer wall as an enemy since childhood. She was familiar with the two forces that Dean was talking about, but she couldn't believe that this teenager who looked younger than her had such a lofty status. Moreover, such a person would personally go to the battlefield. This is my knight's honor medal. This is the master medal. Dean took out two medals from his pocket and threw them on the table. I won't say anything more if you don't recognize this medal. Yvette was surprised as she recognized the knight's honor medal at first glance. She picked it up and carefully looked at it. She confirmed that it wasn't fake. She couldn't help but look at Dean in shock. You didn't lie? Dean said. Is it necessary to lie to a prisoner like you? Yvette's eyes twitched. She found out that the teenager's mouth was very poisonous. She took a deep breath. All right, I believe you. What do you want to know? I want to know everything that you know. Dean slowly said. By the way, I don't like troublesome people. I hope that you can tell me everything at once. Otherwise, I don't mind using hard means to force you to speak. I can guarantee that my means will be more effective than the military. At least I can find thousands of people to rape and humiliate you. But they won't be so bold. Yvette's expression changed as her eyes flickered. Dean faintly said, By the way, I'll tell you one more thing. You barbarians have been defeated and expelled from the Golden Wall. If you don't believe me, then I'll let my attendants take you to the Golden Wall to see the scenery there. In addition, I'll tell you one more thing. The reason why you barbarians were defeated was because I created a legendary weapon to expel you from the Golden Wall. Yvette's face changed color and said in shock, Impossible, we can't lose. I said that I can take you to verify it. There is no need to lie to you. Dean indifferently said, Now the military is considering whether to attack the barbarians' headquarters. They're thinking about the loss of the war. I have a lot of weapons in my hands. I can help the military to completely exterminate your barbarians. But I don't want to do that. If you're willing to believe me, then I can give you a place in the outer wall in the future as long as you give me a few years. Moreover, no one will expel you from the outer wall. So, I hope you can be honest and be good to both of us. Chapter 429. The fragrance of tea filled the study room. Dean stared at Yvette as he asked all the questions in his mind. He listened to her answers while paying attention to her heart and the blood vessels in her body. He could clearly see the heartbeat of the latter under the thermal vision. This would help him to detect if she was lying. Inner wall? I don't know about it. Even if there is, I have no right to ask about it. Yvette replied honestly. Dean looked at her heartbeat. He nodded. All right, my questions are over. I didn't expect you to be the little princess of the barbarian royal family. I will take revenge for you. Biting her lips, Yvette's eyes flashed with a trace of resentment. I hope to kill them in the most vicious way possible. No problem. Dean readily agreed. Yvette stared at him. How do you know that they did that to me? Dean saw that there was a trace of shame in her voice. The coldness in his eyes softened a bit. I believe that any senior hunter would be able to smell the dirty smell on your body. Go and take a bath. Yvette was startled and her face turned pale. She subconsciously covered her lower abdomen with her hands, but then she realized that this action was indecent. She gritted her teeth and said, I'll go first. Dean got up and opened the door. He called out to Crone in the corridor. Crone ran up. Master, take her to take a bath. Dean said, Yes. Crone immediately turned his head and said to Yvette, Miss, please. Dean's eyes lit up as he watched Yvette leave with Crone. According to Yvette, their ancestors came from the inner wall, but because of the war they were expelled to the outer wall. Later they were expelled to the radiation zone. They stayed in the radiation zone for more than 200 years. At that time, the giant wall of the inner wall was built. There are consortiums involved in the war. In addition to Melon Consortium, Huasheng, Green and Scott Consortium are involved. The merchants won't move if there is no profit. There's no need to worry about the collapse of the inner wall. Dean narrowed his eyes. The military should be aware of this point, but they couldn't investigate it. If he didn't take the initiative, then the military wouldn't be able to bring down the Melon Consortium even if they got the evidence. It seemed that there was a contradictory balance in the seemingly complex situation. Perhaps this was what the inner wall wanted. Unfortunately, Yvette was just a little princess of the king of barbarians. Although she was talented in fighting, in the barbarian social system, women were forbidden to participate in military discussions. According to her, although her father was the chief of all tribes and the king of all barbarians, there were more than 50 children of the king of barbarians. Yvette was ranked 27th among the daughters, and she had 5 younger sisters, the youngest of whom had just learned to walk. If she was a man, then she would be able to touch the top secrets of the barbarians. Time flew by. 2 days passed. In the blink of an eye, it was the day of Dean's public lecture. In the last 2 days, old Foline had sent the parasitic soul worms for Dean to choose from. There were 16 parasitic soul worms. Most of them were ordinary parasitic soul worms. They could be used as magic marks to become ordinary hunters. The transformation of the body was weak, and the increase in strength wasn't big. Moreover, their ability was relatively ordinary. They could make the body more resistant to heat or hunger, but their role in combat was negligible. In addition to the ordinary parasitic soul worms, there were 4 rare parasitic soul worms. They could be used as hunters. Dean was surprised that there was a rare parasitic soul worm among the 16 parasitic soul worms. This rare parasitic soul worm came from the swallower. It was at the same level as the magic marks of the infected. Its ability was to provide a strong digestive ability. Not only could it digest the flesh and blood of the undead, which contained viruses, but it could also digest the flesh and blood of poisonous monsters. Its intestines could be said to be immune to poison. It could eliminate most of the viruses, bacteria, and parasites. In addition, it could also digest metals, poisonous plants, bark, stones, and so on. Of course, he needed to reach the level of a senior hunter in order to evolve such a high-level ability. In addition to the terrifying digestive ability, The Swallower magic mark also had a good attack effect. The strong acid in the stomach could be shot out through the tip of the tongue to attack the enemy. As long as it was an intestine devourer magic mark hunter, the tongue would gradually evolve into a hollow tube connected to the stomach. It could use the strong acid in the stomach to make a sneak attack, which often had a miraculous effect in the battle. This is the Swallower parasitic soulworm. I will give it to you, Noise. Dean called Jean and handed him the gray parasitic soulworm. Train well in the future and learn from Sergei and Gwyneth. Now your starting point is the same as them. Noise looked at the gray parasitic soulworm. Young master, this is a rare parasitic soulworm. I have my own magic mark. Dean laughed. It was a waste to use the rare parasitic soulworm as a promotion material. Ordinary parasitic soulworm was enough. Crone's expression turned ugly, but it soon disappeared. He looked at Noise and said, Young master gave it to you. Take it. Noise came back to his senses. He took the box and bowed. Young master, you are the one who pulled my life out of prison. Scar and I swore allegiance to you. I will do the same in the future. No matter what you ask me to do, I am willing to die. Duddian laughed. Well, then you should die now. Noise almost choked. He looked up in shock. Don't be so mushy. Go. Dean waved his hand. Noise reacted and his face turned red. He saluted again and then left. Dean looked at Crone. Which family gave the Swallower magic mark? Who was the person they recommended? Crone turned around and handed over the register in his hand. Dean took a look and wrote down the name. You go out first. Tomorrow is the day of my lecture. Prepare for it. Yes, young master. Crone looked at the 4 bottles of rare parasitic soul worms on the table. After he left, Duddian closed the window and added a few pieces of dry wood to the fireplace. Then he sat by the fireplace and took off his coat, exposing his upper body. His skin was as white as snow, but his body was covered with intricate whip marks and sharp blade scars. Some of the scars were shocking, especially the steel nail scars on his shoulder blade, which still left a round scar. His divinized magic mark was in the middle of these scars on his chest. It was like a sharp sword lying across his chest. Dean gently touched for a moment and picked up the parasitic soul worm next to him. He began to absorb the parasitic soul worm from the ordinary ones. He was already at the limit of intermediate level before he got the magic mark. His physique had reached the bottleneck. It was useless to absorb more God's blessings because the magic mark was connected to the body. God's blessings were not to strengthen the body, but to strengthen the magic mark. The magic mark had stages. When a stage reached saturation, it was necessary to use the body of other parasitic soul worms as nourishment to step into the next stage. Dean took out the ordinary parasitic soul worm from the bottle and injected it into the magic mark on his chest. 1, 2, 3. Chapter 430. In the blink of an eye, Dean injected 5 parasitic soul worms into the magic mark on his chest. The magic mark only bulged a little and then calmed down at a very slow speed. Dean raised his eyebrows. Generally, a hunter only needed 4 parasitic soul worms to promote from intermediate to senior level. If he was unlucky, 5 or 6 would be enough. Unless he was extremely unlucky, he needed 7 or 8 to satisfy his magic mark's appetite. Looking at his situation now, it seemed that he belonged to the category of extremely unlucky people. After injecting 5 parasitic soul worms, there was no feeling at all. Dean could only continue to inject. Anyway, with his current status, it was easy to get parasitic soul worms. He just needed to hook his finger and someone would send them to him. He didn't need to squat outside the giant wall to hunt for parasitic soul worms. If he didn't get the magic mark, he would become a monster's meal. 6, 7, 8, 9. With the ingestion of more and more parasitic soul worms, Dean finally felt a slight pulse in the magic mark on his chest. It seemed to be slightly trembling. This was a precursor of evolution. He was surprised and continued to inject parasitic soul worms. In the blink of an eye, he injected 2 parasitic soul worms. The magic mark on his chest trembled more and more intensely. At the same time, it emitted a heat that spread throughout his body. His body, which was originally cold, seemed to have warmed up under this hot current. It seems that it's not enough. Dean stared at the magic mark on his chest. He waited for a moment, but found no other movement. He couldn't help but be speechless. He was not extremely unlucky, but extremely unlucky. Was it because of the legendary magic mark? He looked at the remaining 4 rare parasitic soul worms and hesitated for a moment. Finally, he clenched his teeth and grabbed a bottle. He took out a green parasitic soul worm and injected it into his magic mark. Although using rare parasitic soul worms to promote his soul worm was an absolute wastrel, Dean didn't care so much. These things could be bought again. For him, he could easily exchange them for any kind of invention. If he continued to wait for others to send him ordinary parasitic soul worms, the time was too slow, and he was not sure if someone would send them. And he never liked to wait. With the injection of this rare parasitic soul worm, Dean suddenly felt the heat in his chest boiling, as if he was suddenly ignited by a fire. His whole body felt a burning sensation, and his pores expanded, oozing out a lot of sweat. Dean took a light breath. He had this feeling that the breakthrough was imminent. He grabbed another bottle and took out a rare parasitic soul worm and injected it into his magic mark. Suddenly, his whole body felt like it was about to explode. He felt as if his brain had been hit by a volcano. His mind was full of heat, and his consciousness was blurred by this heat. However, he could vaguely feel that there seemed to be something twisting in his chest. When he felt this, he suddenly remembered the time when he had absorbed the Splitter's parasitic soul worm. The parasitic soul worm had tried to drill into his brain. Suddenly, his pores shrank, and his whole body was frightened. He looked down and saw that the shape of the magic mark on his chest was changing. If it was a small sword mark before, then now it was like a finger-long sword chopstick in the middle of his chest. The change of a magic mark meant that the promotion was successful. Dean took a deep breath. He felt that his whole body was hot, wet, and full of sweat. He pulled a towel next to him to dry his body. He felt that his hand was very light, as if his arms suddenly became thousands of pounds lighter. His thoughts moved, and his arms stretched out unexpectedly. I don't know if there are any new abilities after being promoted to senior hunter. There was a glimmer of expectation in Dean's eyes. Compared to his own physical increase, he was more looking forward to the new ability. If it was a better ability, the effect would be much greater than brute force. However, life was not a game after all. There was no attribute list. He could only slowly explore it. Fortunately, he had learned how to explore his own ability when he deified the magic mark last time. This time, he still did the same, starting from his eyes. When he was ready to experiment with his eyes, he suddenly found a strange thing. He could actually see the cabinet. He was facing the fireplace at the moment. The cabinet was behind him, but he could see it. Dean was startled and suddenly overjoyed. He turned his head and faced the cabinet. He suddenly saw the fireplace behind him, and the flame inside was strong. The angle of my field of vision has expanded. Dean touched his eyelids. It was incredible. He suddenly thought of something. He quickly ran to the mirror and looked at himself. In the mirror, his eyes were like a human's. They weren't protruding out. He was relieved, but soon he noticed that there was a very light green color in his eyes. This touch of green was in the middle of the pupil. Dean looked closer and blinked. Yes, there was a touch of green in both of his eyes. Sure enough, the structure of the eyeball has changed. Fortunately, it's not big. Dean was a little relieved. As the ability of the hunters improved, their body would be subtly changed by the magic marks. It could be said that any senior hunter would have a part of their body that was different from a human. For example, Sergei had scales on his back. This was the result of his steel dragon magic marks. As for the other hunters, some of them had extremely long teeth that were exposed outside their mouths like ferocious fangs. Some of them had oddly colored, brightly colored hair. Some of them had skin like crocodile skin, rough and hard. Some of them had fingers that were like beast claws, long and ugly. All the hunters' bodies would change. As their strength increased, more and more parts of their bodies would change. Many of them had mutated parts on the surface which made them look like monsters. This was the reason why hunters always lived in the dark. They were rejected by the nobles and feared by the civilians. My vision is a bit like that of an insect, but the surface structure of the eyeball is still the same as that of a human. There is no protrusion, and the eyelids have not degenerated. Dean looked down at his body, looking for other parts of the mutation. When he concentrated, he suddenly found that his line of sight seemed to fall into a bloody world. Suddenly, the scene in front of him changed, and he saw a skeleton. And this skeleton was him. He was so shocked that he almost fell down. When he moved his gaze away from this strange scene, his mood calmed down a little, and his pupils seemed to relax. When he looked again, he suddenly found that the skeleton from before was gone, and it was still himself made of flesh and blood. Dean was startled for a moment. Suddenly, he was overjoyed. His vision seemed to have gone a step further. He could directly see the bone marrow. Moreover, the most important thing was that he seemed to be able to control his vision. It was not fixed like before. Otherwise, he would see everyone as a skeleton. It was no different from living in a kingdom of the undead. The most important thing was that he would get face blindness. The angle of sight seems to be more than 270 degrees. I can also see the skeletons inside the body. It belongs to the medium-high perspective ability, and I can control it freely. Dean was pleasantly surprised. It must be known that although a normal person's single-eye field of vision was about 150 degrees, the area where the two eyes overlapped was the area where people could see clearly. This area was 120 degrees. In most cases, people could only see clearly in the 90-degree range. The more focused the attention, the smaller the field of vision. Usually, when the attention was focused on one thing, the field of vision would be reduced to less than 1/5. Chapter 431. Splitter is an extreme attack-type monster. There is such a big change in vision. I guess the improvement in combat would be even stronger. Dean couldn't help but look forward to it. He tested smell and hearing one by one according to the previous experiment sequence. Through the experiment, Dean found that his hearing and smell were still confused. When he pinched his nose, he could distinguish the sourness, sweetness, bitterness, and spiciness of the smell through his hearing. When he blocked his ears, he could smell the sound emitted by the smell. It was not much different from before, but the intensity had increased. The range was nearly twice as wide as before. He could clearly smell the many smells mixed in the air and the subtle sounds from all over the castle, including a corner of the kitchen. There was a squeaking sound of something small gnawing on a hard object. It should be a mouse hiding there. Dean was disappointed that there was no new change in his hearing and smell. But after thinking for a while, he was relieved. Splitter was an extreme attack-type monster. Its high-speed movement and attack required keen vision. But the need for smell and hearing was not so strong. Dean moved his body. After the test, he found that his physical strength was more than twice as strong as before. His wrist strength and grip strength were surprisingly strong. He could easily bend hard metal tools out of shape. Generally, when an intermediate hunter is promoted to a senior hunter, my physical strength will double. Some of them will increase by 1.5 times. According to the Dragon Girl, an intermediate hunter can hunt monsters around level 11 to 19. A more powerful intermediate hunter can hunt monsters around level 20. A senior hunter can hunt monsters around level 28 or 29. When I was an intermediate hunter, I was able to easily kill a level 27 monster. I didn't even have to rely on close combat skills. This means that my physique can cope with a level 30 monster, which is the limit of a senior hunter. Now, I should be able to kill a level 40 monster. If I improve my combat skills, then I can kill a level 45 monster. Dean's eyes flashed. There was no modern punching machine here. He could only use the monsters outside the giant wall as a reference to evaluate his physical strength. But it was convenient. After all, the meaning of the existence of a hunter was to hunt monsters. It was more valuable to know the level of monsters he could kill than to know his specific strength. My magic marks are still at the senior hunter stage, but the increase in strength is far stronger than ordinary senior hunters. The dragon girl was sent to hunt level 68 mature splitter. I'm still far from her. However, if the magic mark evolves again, maybe I can barely catch up with her. The potential of a deified legendary magic mark is stronger than her, unless she also has a deified legendary magic mark. Thinking of this, the surprise in Dean's heart gradually calmed down. He looked down at his abdomen, and his pupils seemed to adjust slightly after being oppressed. Suddenly, he saw the bones and internal organs in his abdomen, as well as the white ice in his abdomen. However, in a range of 270 degrees of vision, he found that in addition to his abdomen, there was also a large piece of white ice in his left arm. The bones of his left arm seemed to be a bit transparent, like the structure of ice cubes. Seeing this, Dean was slightly surprised. Suddenly, he realized that perhaps the main reason for the abnormality in his abdomen came from his left arm. His abdomen was infected with a large amount of blood from other monsters. It was just a fuse that caused the changes in his abdomen. Otherwise, it was impossible to explain why his left arm turned into white ice while his right arm didn't have the slightest change. My left arm was directly absorbing the cold crystal. It was eroded by the cold and spread to my abdomen. So, the ice blood disease should be caused by the direct absorption of the cold crystal. Dean fell into thought. After a long time, he slowly recovered his thoughts and looked down at his body. Previously, he saw that he was full of bones, so he didn't take a closer look. Now he looked one by one and suddenly found that there were very strange changes in his body. First of all, the position and number of bones. He had seen the normal structure of human bones in the super chip, but his bones were somewhat deformed. It seems that there are 2 more forearm bones in my arm. The phalanges have become thinner, and there's a small phalange bone next to it. Dean looked at his body while trying to move his fingers. He grasped the bent metal tools next to him. Suddenly, he found that when he exerted force in his fingers, the small phalanges next to the phalanges were like a bracket supporting the phalanges, so that the phalanges could easily burst out a powerful force. Dean was startled and then came to his senses. No wonder I'm only a senior hunter, but my strength and speed are far beyond that of ordinary senior hunters. At the genetic level, I'm still a senior hunter, but the abnormal structure inside my body allows me to exert stronger strength and speed. Dean thought in his heart. The same material, different structure, played different effects. Compared to ordinary human beings, the structure of his body seemed to be much better. But these changes only enhance the physique. It seems that there are no other combat abilities. Dean looked at his whole body in doubt. Splitter was a monster with extreme attack. But in addition to the obvious changes in vision, there didn't seem to be any other changes in combat. This feeling was a bit strange. In terms of ability, his senses had greatly improved. Compared to other senior hunters who were good at perception, he was in no way inferior or even stronger. But perception was only incidental to Splitter. Like other combat-type hunters, some could control blood. Some were like Glenn, who had black weaver magic marks. She could burrow into the ground and shrink pores to hide her breath. Some are like the infected, who could enhance their sense of smell and immunity, as well as the ability to absorb cold crystals and night vision. But for now, the Divine Eyes Splitter magic marks didn't give him many abilities, even fewer than the rare magic marks. Is it possible that the ability has evolved, but I haven't noticed it? Can't the ability be stimulated by ordinary tests? Dean thought in his heart. If this was the case, then maybe he would be able to stimulate the ability when he encountered a well-matched opponent. After all, some abilities would be instinctively displayed in times of crisis. Temple of Elements. Drudge Mountain. Blessed Forest. The castle extended from Mount Degia to the front of the forest. The outermost edge was the divine castle where the apprentice oracles and primary oracles lived. As the hierarchy continued to the front of the forest, the divine castle outside the forest was the divine castle of the Deputy Temple Lord. It was magnificent, and the manor was vast. A large number of temple staff were taking care of the strange flowers and plants in the manor, as well as the strange trees. There was a lonely castle by the lake in the depths of the forest. It wasn't large, and the construction wasn't magnificent. There were some common fruits and vegetables planted in the manor. There was no staff of the temple to take care of them. There was an old man wearing ordinary linen clothes. He was carrying a kettle and was watering the manor. He was taking care of the vegetables. He was holding a small hoe in his hand. He was removing the weeds next to the vegetables. He looked like an old fruit farmer. Woo! Suddenly, a giant black shadow jumped out from the back of the manor and rushed towards the old fruit farmer. It was a giant leopard dog. It was nearly 3 meters tall and had strong limbs. There was no fat on its body. There were brown spots all over its body. There was a sharp horn on the top of its head. Its eyes were dark golden amber. It was full of killing intent. It moved as fast as lightning and arrived in front of the old fruit farmer in the blink of an eye. It opened its mouth but didn't bite the old fruit farmer. Instead, it jumped in front of the old fruit farmer. It was like a watchdog as it roared towards the outside of the manor. The old fruit farmer was in the middle of weeding when he saw this. He paused for a moment and raised his blurry eyes to look outside the manor. Lightning Sprout. Wow, a rare monster has been tamed to such an extent. Good job of the temple master. A burst of applause echoed from the depths of the forest. A tall figure slowly came out from the shadows. Roar! The giant black beast let out a low roar, full of demonstration. The old fruit farmer put down the kettle and straightened his body. His previously dim eyes seemed to shoot out 2 rays of cold light. He slightly narrowed his eyes and calmly said, "The war is over. What do you want from the inner wall?" At this moment, the figure in the shadows had completely walked out. It was a handsome young man holding a 2-meter-long wooden stick in his hand. He wore an extremely simple white robe, which was like a huge bedsheet, curling his body sideways. The hand and shoulder that held the stick were exposed outside the robe. He looked like a monk, but he had a head of elegant golden hair. Chapter 432. Roar. The black monster, the lightning sprout, saw the young man approaching it. It suddenly took a few steps forward and roared ferociously. Electric sparks appeared on its forehead, and all of its hair stood up like a sharp hedgehog. The young man's expression did not change, but a ray of light suddenly flashed in his eyes. The wooden stick in his hand gently knocked on the ground, making a light sound. He still seemed to be standing casually, but his posture was already stretched, as if he would attack at any time. The thunder sprout growled. Just as it was about to rush out, its body suddenly stopped, and its eyeballs moved back slightly. The old man who watered the vegetables earlier stroked the thunder sprout's fur and slowly walked out. "You want to bring a person?" The old man patted the lightning sprout and calmly looked at the youth. "Is it the child who has created a new legendary item?" The youth smiled and said, "I only know that his name is Dean." The old man stared at him and slowly retracted his eyes. He gently touched the ears of the lightning sprout. The lightning sprout screamed and jumped back into the manor. "He is a real genius. Are you sure you want to kill him?" The old man turned around and slowly entered the fortress behind the orchard. The young man smiled, pushed open the door of the manor, and followed. He said, "This is the order of the higher-ups. This person used the power of the devil. If it wasn't for his good comprehension, I would have purified him. This time, I'm just sending him to the monastery to let him think about it. If he knows what's good for him, then, if you want to take him, then take him." The old man interrupted him. His voice was emotionless as he said, "You'd better leave. I don't welcome outsiders here." The young man was slightly startled. One of his feet was in midair. He paused for a moment as he looked at the old man's gradually disappearing figure. After a moment of silence, he slowly retracted his foot, bowed slightly, and turned around to leave the manor. The sun rose. The warm sun shone on the church mountain. A new day had arrived. The bell echoed on the top of the mountain, pushing away the morning mist. On the steps at the foot of the mountain, a black that the size of an ant was moving forward. It was actually countless oracles of the divine hall dressed in luxurious clothes, walking the steps to the largest church castle in Mount Degia. Today was also the day that Dean announced to teach. It was 9 in the morning. It was 7 o'clock at the moment. All the architects got up and rushed to St. Peter's Cathedral. This was the place where the masters of the Temple of Elements gave their lectures. Since it was a public lecture, the lecture venue was the square in front of the cathedral. The square was very vast. It was 185 meters long and 160 meters wide. It could accommodate 100,000 people. There were a total of 108 towering pillars around the square. The statues of angels and goddesses were engraved on them, looking magnificent and magnificent. There were many people gathered in the square. Naturally, there weren't more than 100,000 architects from the Temple of Elements, but there were 20 or 30,000 of them. The more they stood in the front, the clearer they could hear. At the moment, they were scrambling for the most conspicuous position in the front. Not only could they hear Dean's words, but they could also be chosen by him. There are still 2 hours before the lecture starts, and there are already so many people here. I guess there are already more than 10,000 people. There was a trace of amazement in Abyss's eyes as he looked at the noisy scene. In the past, there were tens of thousands of people who came to listen to their master's public lectures. It was a big scene, and it was worth to be proud of in front of other masters. But now it was nothing compared to the scene in front of him. Today is his first public lecture, so it is inevitable that it will attract a lot of people. I estimate that at least 10,000 people will come. The total number of people in our temple is only around 30,000. He is going to become famous. A lean old man said with a complex expression. He was Arson who had a quarrel with Dean. Today he came with his friend Abyssa to watch the lecture. Abyssa sighed. Even the two of us have come. If the little guys don't come, then they will be too unmotivated. Arson's mouth twitched. I want to see what he's going to say. Oomph. Being able to create inventions doesn't mean that he can explain them. Teaching is a test of the accumulation of professional knowledge. He has just become a master, but he dares to teach in public. He is arrogant. If he had studied in a library for 3 years, then maybe he would have become a useful person. Abyssa knew that there was still resentment in his heart. He shook his head and whispered, "He has already become a useful person." Arson choked, and his face darkened. "Hey!" At this time, a figure came from the side. It was a square-faced old man. He was wearing casual clothes. He smiled at the two. "You two old guys also came? Do you want to see his lecture?" Abyssa looked up as he recognized the person. "Master Peter, you have come. What's the reason for us not to come?" Arson's face was still gloomy as he saw the old man. He turned his head and pretended not to notice. The square-faced old man walked over and said with a smile, "If he hadn't said that he would teach 10 days in advance, I really wouldn't have the time to come. I've been busy for a long time for this day. Now, I brought a few of my good-for-nothing students here to take a look." Abyssa laughed. "You are too polite. Carrie and Casper are senior architects. I estimate that it will take less than 2 years for them to become new masters. Your ability to teach students is the best among us. I'm flattered." The square-faced old man laughed. Arson frowned. It's useless to become a new master. If it wasn't for Dean, then they would be able to shine. But now that he has come out, the others will become foils. There was a trace of embarrassment on Abyssa's face. The square-faced old man's face slowly turned gloomy. He looked at Arson. "I heard that you had a conflict with the legendary master. Why? You can't compete with him, so you want to pull us in?" Arson's face changed as he didn't expect the old man to be so direct. He couldn't help but get angry. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Abyssa smiled awkwardly. "It's just a joke. Don't take it seriously." The square-faced old man coldly snorted. "Don't say a word? I'm not the one who started it. Some people are jealous of others because they can't compare with others. They don't work hard all day and are jealous of others. How dare they provoke me? Ridiculous." Arson angrily said, "Who are you talking about? I'm jealous of him. When I became famous, he was still in his mother's womb." The square-faced old man sneered. "You are old, yet you want to compete with a child. Do you know that he wasn't born when you became famous? But now that you're about to be buried, you've been surpassed by others. You." Arson's body trembled in anger. The square-faced old man looked at him with a face full of mockery. "What are you two arguing about?" A voice echoed from the side. A thin old man came over. It was Skagen. Abyssal saw him and quickly said, "You persuade them." Skagen came over and looked at both of them. "Today is the big day of Dean's lecture. We shouldn't make trouble here. We should be happy that new seeds are growing in the new season. We have a legendary master in the temple. He will drive the temple in the future and completely change the life of the outer wall." The square-faced old man looked at him and smiled. "I think so too, but I hate it the most when people speak ill of others behind their backs. Trying to sow discord? Really dirty. Humph, he's already so old, yet he doesn't practice any magic all day. I don't know what he's thinking. He made a name for himself when he was young, but when he's old, he only knows how to gnaw on the mountain of gold he earned when he was young. He likes to bully the younger generation when he has nothing better to do, and he always talks about respecting his elders. Such a person, the value of his life that he created when he was young is wasted when he's old." "You!" Arson glared at him. Skagen smiled and said, "All right, don't talk too much. Don't let the children laugh at you. A master should act like a master." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.